1 minute to air. The live stream has started.
Good evening. Welcome to the January 2023 meeting of the Durham Planning Commission. The members of the Durham Planning Commission have been appointed by the City Council and the County Board of Commissioners to make recommendations to the elected officials. You should know that the elected officials have the final say on any issue before us tonight. While this meeting is being conducted in person, it is also accessible using the Zoom virtual meeting platform. In the virtual meeting platform, public participants do not have the ability to talk or be seen on video by default, and to maintain meeting decorum and a discernible record of the meeting, the chat function has been disabled. For those attending in person, if you plan to speak on an agenda item tonight, please go to the table to my left and sign up to speak. When speaking, please state your name and your address clearly when you come to the podium, and please speak directly into the microphone. If you are attending the meeting virtually, you will be given the ability to speak at the appropriate time. If you have pre-registered, your name will be called for you to make your comments, just like in an in-person public hearing. You may also call in during the meeting tonight by dialing 1-301-715-8592. If you call in during the meeting, you will need to wait until the public hearing you are interested in starts. After all the pre-registered speakers have shared their comments, I will ask if there is anyone else wishing to speak. At that point, you will need to digitally raise your hand by pressing *9 on your phone, and when recognized, state your name and address before making your comments. Time may be limited for speakers depending on the length of the agenda. Finally, all motions are stated in the affirmative, so if a motion fails or ties, the recommendation is for denial. Thank you, and may we have roll call. I don't.
Is it not working?
Mic is on. Oh, there it is.
There we go.
Volume wasn't up.
All right. Chair Amendolia?
Here.
Vice Chair Cameron?
Here.
Commissioner Baker? I believe will be requesting excused absence. Commissioner Cutright?
Here.
Commissioner Chagaris?
Here.
Commissioner Davis?
Here.
Commissioner Harrod?
Here.
Commissioner McIver?
Here.
Commissioner Morgan?
Here.
Commissioner Cease?
Here.
Commissioner Trapp?
Here.
Commissioner Valentine? I believe he has an excused absence request as well. Commissioner Carmen Williams? Commissioner Zuri Williams?
Here.
Yeah, and we heard from Commissioners Baker and Commissioner Carmen Williams about their absence for tonight, so I'd like to request an excused absence for both of them.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Morgan, seconded by Commissioner Cutright. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
All opposed have the same right. The motion passes unanimously. Up next on our agenda is the approval of the minutes and the consistency statements from our December 13th, 2022 meeting. Does anybody have any comments or edits for the December minutes? Seeing none, I would take a motion for approval at this time.
I move to approve the December 13th minutes and consistency statements.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Vice Chair Cameron, seconded by Commissioner Valentine. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed have the same right. Motion passes unanimously. And next, we have adjustments to the agenda. I believe we're going to make one adjustment to the agenda for the second public hearing on our agenda, case Z2100046 Novel University Hill Development Agreement. This case, we have some extra staff in attendance tonight because of the nature of this case, and we want to bump that case up to be the first case so that those staff members who aren't needed for the other rezoning cases may go enjoy their evening elsewhere once we finish that case. So can I get a motion to move case Z2100046 to be our first public hearing?
So move.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Commissioner Trapp, seconded by Vice Chair Cameron. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed have the same right. Motion passes unanimously. With that, in my scrambling to get here, I failed to make sure I was familiar with Commissioner Trapp's last name, and so I had to double check. Commissioner Trapp, welcome. It's your first meeting. If you want to say any opening remarks or anything, you have the chance now, but just want to say welcome, and we're glad to have you join us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the most quiet I'll ever be, but I look forward to serving and look so forward to serving with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I think we can move into our public hearings. Alexander, is there anything else
Nope,
on your plate beforehand?
we're good.
Great. Great, so we are going to start with case Z2100046 Novel University Hill Development Agreement, and we will begin with the staff report.
Hey, good evening. Chairman Dolia, Vice Chair Cameron, Alexander Cahill with the Planning Department, here to present case Z21046 Novel University Hill. This is a request for a development agreement. This is going to apply to parcels at 3737 Durham Chapel Hill Boulevard and 3019 Auto Drive. The site is within the South Square MLK Compact Neighborhood tier. It's within the city limits already. This is about a 6.5 acre site. The existing zoning is commercial neighborhood and commercial general. Because this is a development agreement, there is no change to the base zoning designation. This is within a design district for the future land use map. As such, there is no change to the future land use map as there is no change to the zoning. There are no zoning overlays that apply to this site. And we'll get into the details of the development agreement here in just a minute. You can look at the context map and you can see the zoning throughout around the site as commercial neighborhood, commercial general, and there's no change to the zoning map designation at this time. The aerial map shows out the corridor, the development that is adjacent to this site. The corridor shows that opportunities for development here on this site and some adjacent parcels as well. So the development agreement is a little bit of a comparison here. We got some questions ahead of time. We want to make sure we talk through this because development agreements are a little unfamiliar to our planning commission. We've only ever seen one before, and so we want to take a little bit of time to talk about this. A development agreement was something that's enabled by state statute for under Durham Charter Authority. It allows for a developer to ask for something such as increased density in return for a benefit to the city. We saw one other development agreement we've had since this became a possibility, and that was the Farrington Road project. You can see the comparison on the screen. This development agreement is about 6.5 acres. The Farrington Road project was about 8 acres. The allowed units that were allowed by right under the Farrington Road project were 161, and they were proposing 332. Allowed by right on this site is 109 units with a proposed total number of 400 units. You can also see that what that percent increase in number of units is, significantly more in this development agreement request, but you'll also see there's some additional commitments that they are proffering or making in this development agreement that they didn't make in the Farrington Road one. 82 on-site affordable units were part of the Farrington Road project. That project is still underway with slated development of those units by this summer of 2023. There are 66 off-site affordable units that are associated with this project, which we'll talk about more here in a minute. So just to recap, under 160D of North Carolina general statutes, a municipality may enter into a development agreement with an entity for a development of property through adoption of an ordinance by the governing body. That is this development agreement instrument. Statutory development agreements are intended to provide community benefits within developments that are difficult to accommodate within traditional zoning processes. So this proposed development agreement has several elements that we will cover. We will be available to answer questions at the end, as will the applicant. Prior to the issuance of any certificates of compliance, the development of this property, the developer will provide the necessary financing for around estimated $2.6 million for the completion of 66 income restricted units. These units were approved within the Carver Street Assemblage project. Some of you may remember as you were around when that was voted on and approved by council. This is a base utilization of a 4% low-income housing tax credit. And it's currently valued at $2.6 million, but the gap financing around that changes, which we'll talk more about in a minute. Some other estimated benefits to the city community in this development agreement is that prior to the issuance of any certificates of compliance, the developer is going to donate parcels to Habitat for Humanity of Durham, nonprofit, affordable housing nonprofit. These contain approximately 5.1 acres located between Carver Street Assemblage and the Oxford Manor Public Housing Community. This land is valued at about $286,000. Some additional benefits to the community in this development agreement is a donation to Go Durham, Go Triangle of one new bus shelter in the vicinity of Novel University Hill. That's valued at around $50,000, which is the cost to improve or install a bus shelter. And then the construction of new sidewalks and related infrastructure to connect Novel University Hill to the new Go Durham, Go Triangle bus shelter. These connections, these sidewalks and infrastructure are valued around $75,000. One of the questions we also received was, what are the city's remedies around, how we hold a developer accountable within the development agreement? There's a lot of legal jargon in there I didn't want to spend a lot of time on, but I think one of the things that's important to pull out is that no certificates of compliance will be issued for any of the 400 market rate multifamily units to be built on this property unless and until the developer completes its obligations under Section 11 of the benefits, which is the funding of the Carver Street Assemblage project and the bus shelter. So this is a development agreement. There's a lot to it. Staff do make recommendations and determinations around development agreements. This is consistent with many of the community goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. We're looking for creative and varied housing solutions as one of the adopted goals and objectives. This meets the intent of that. Intentional and thoughtful design, it meets that. There maybe is some inconsistency with the environmental components to this. In addition, the benefit of affordable housing in this project is not located within the site itself. The applicant will be able to speak a little bit more to that tonight. This is for the funding of units that are off-site in a different part of Durham. So that's something to consider as you deliberate on this. With that, staff are available to answer any questions, and also the applicant team is here. In addition, we have some additional staff. Our city attorney, assistant city attorney? Senior city attorney is here to answer questions as well tonight.
Great, thank you. With that, we will open the public hearing and we'll begin with the applicant presentation. You'll have 10 minutes to provide your presentation.
Alexander, could you bring up our PowerPoint, please? Oh, it's already up here. Thank you. Sorry.
And Grace, can you run the timer?
It'll be well under 10 minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Amendolia, Vice Chair Cameron, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Patrick Biker with Morningstar Law Group. I live at 2614 Stewart Drive. I'm here tonight representing Crescent Communities out of Charlotte. Dan Gualtieri with Crescent Communities is their Director of Development, and he's working with us on this project. I also would like to introduce the rest of our folks who are here tonight. Ted Heilbrunn is a principal with Kelly Development. He is one of the leading affordable housing developers in the state of North Carolina. Nicole Tyra is with Habitat for Humanity, and Matt Gross is one of our engineers with Kimley Horn. It's been my privilege to work with Crescent Communities for about 15 years now in Durham, and I remember working with them on the approvals for two fine multifamily projects between 9th Street and 15th Street back in 2007 to 2010. My recollection is that the Watts Hospital Hillendale Neighborhood Association supported those projects. The agenda item that's before you tonight pertains to what is, as Mr. Cahill stated, the second development agreement between a private developer and the City of Durham. Again, it's been my professional privilege to work on both of these development agreements, and I do want to highlight one other salient point about the Farrington Road Development Agreement was that the city had to contribute $3.6 million in gap financing to make that project work. Okay, $3.6 million. The amount of funding that the city is contributing through this development agreement is zero. I can assure the Planning Commission that we've had strong community engagement regarding the redevelopment of this site we're considering. And in that regard, Dr. Andrew Collins, who's a longtime eye doctor in this neighborhood, and he owns the building at the corner of Academy and University, he attended our in-person neighborhood meeting, and he told me to convey his support of this redevelopment to the Planning Commission. Dr. Collins, like me, fondly remembers purchasing a car at this location back when it was a thriving car dealership, and some of the folks who've been here in Durham may remember that it was our Cadillac dealership and then our Mazda dealership. But now, this is the state of it today. Based on our community engagement, I wish to highlight that this proposal is intentional about boosting pedestrian and transit infrastructure for this neighborhood since it is located in the compact neighborhood tier. To that end, we appreciated the guidance of Go Triangle staff, who along with Dr. Collins and several others attended an in-person meeting we had for this project.
Hey, Mr. Biker,
Yes?
are you intending to be displaying slides right now?
No, this is it.
Okay.
You like it?
I just want,
Oh, you're not? How come? I can see it.
there we go.
Got it? Very good. All right. That's above my pay grade. Next, in regard to this development agreement, the agenda item before you tonight will leverage the resources of Crescent Communities and deploy them in the most efficient means possible. This development agreement will provide the missing gap financing for 66 income-restricted units in the Carver Street assemblage that the Planning Commission and the City Council both unanimously approved in the first quarter of 2022. We need to do this through this development agreement because these 66 income-restricted units in Bragtown are shovel-ready, and Mr. Heilbrunn needs to turn in his low-income housing tax credit application next Friday. That is why we are on a tight timeline, and we wish for the Planning Commission to support this in order to support that tax credit application. It is no secret that Durham has several strong, deserving affordable housing developments that would move forward, but for needing full funding of the financing gap that now inevitably exists between the amount that's provided by a 4% low-income housing tax credit and the high cost of construction in 2023. This aforementioned financing gap becomes even more pernicious when a project is not located in a qualified census tract, which is the case with this 6.5-acre site located along Chapel Hill Boulevard. If you have any questions in regards to that, Mr. Heilbrunn is happy to delve into the benefits of locating tax credit developments in qualified census tracts. We have several people who are on the phone line, all in support of this project. They are longtime Durham residents, some of them, who live and work in this area. And so I'll wrap up by saying Crescent Communities wishes to redevelop this site and put it back into productive, beneficial use rather than have it remain a concrete slab. Again, if you'll hear from a few neighbors in support of this project over the phone lines, then we will respectfully ask for your approval, and our team will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. With that, we'll turn to public comment. Staff, can I get the sign-up sheet first of speakers? And if you are attending online and would like to speak on this case, please go ahead and raise your hand at this time so that when the proper time comes, I can recognize you. Patrick Biker, you want to come back up? Okay, so we have no one who's signed up in person, so we'll move to folks that have signed up or who have raised their hand through the Zoom meeting. We'll begin with Mimi Kessler. Mimi, you'll have 2 minutes to provide your comments. Please start by stating your name and address.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name's Mimi Kessler. I live at 1418 Woodland Drive in Durham. I have a question. I guess I don't really understand why some of the affordable units can't be located in this location. It seems to me that that would be helpful for all the businesses around to have more people very close by who could be workers. And so I'm just confused about why they're not having the affordable units on site. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Gerald Benson. Gerald, you'll have 2 minutes. Please state your name and address and state your comments.
Yeah, I'm Gerald Benson. I'm the CFO at Durham Academy, and my address is 204 Colvard Park Drive, Durham, North Carolina, 27713. We have reviewed the plans and the proposal and are very much in support of it for the idea that it would allow more housing to be available for our faculty and staff that we are in desperate need of. I handle our properties for the Academy. We own a few homes that we rent. And I would say every other week I get a call from a faculty member asking whether one of our houses is available for rental. In summary, we are very much in favor of this being approved.
Thank you. Next, we have Seth Jernigan. Seth, you'll have 2 minutes. Please state your name and address and state your comments.
Good evening. This is Seth Jernigan. I live at 4311 Swarthmore Road, Durham, 27707. And I'm pleased to express a strong level of support for this project. I come at this from somewhat of a unique perspective in that I'm a Durham native. I was born and raised in Durham, in South Durham. And our business, I'm in the commercial real estate business. We own and operate SVN Real Estate Associates, which is just, we're located at 3333 Durham, Chapel Hill Boulevard, just up the street from this site. I was actually involved with the sale of this site in 2012, and it was vacant at the time in 2012. And so the site has been vacant for over 10 years now. And I believe multifamily is a great use for the site. And my fear is that if this project does not get approved, that we could go many more years with the site being a vacant concrete pad, which is not good for Durham or anyone living or working near the site. And so, again, I'm pleased to just express strong support and hope that there's an approval recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rick Adams. Rick, you'll have 2 minutes. Please state your name and address and make your comments.
Let me start by asking if you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Rick Adams, and my wife and I reside at 3740 St. Mark's Road. I want to start by thanking you as the City Planning Commission for presiding and giving direction to planning and development in Durham at a time that I would say is arguably the town's finest and most beautiful hour to date. My wife and I own a home which is approximately 1.7 miles from the proposed development. In addition, my business partner and I own our office located at the intersection of Shannon Road and University Drive, which you might likely know as the former First Union Branch Bank, which evolved into the Wells Fargo Branch Bank. So I am in very close proximity to the development, which is the subject of this evening. And in fact, I use, and my family uses, University Hill in many ways, and I've already used it once today, and I will be patron after this call. I would like to endorse the proposed development. University Hill has proven to be very popular and successful development that I believe has contributed greatly to the beauty and quality of Durham. The subject property is not contributing to the town in its current form. The multifamily project, which is proposed, is of high quality, and would be a continuation of the development that we see currently that we have in this area. And thus, I would like to ask the Planning Commission to approve this complex. Thank you.
Thank you. Last, we have Jim Anthony. Jim, you'll have 2 minutes. Please state your name and address and make your comments.
Okay, thank you so much for allowing me to comment. I want to express support for the project. I think that this is one of the most comprehensive and innovative approaches to a redevelopment that I've seen utilizing this new form of development agreement. So kudos to everybody who's been involved with this on the team. And I had the same question that Mimi had earlier, just curious about why not on-site versus off-site. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this case at this time? Okay, I'm seeing no one raise their hand in the Zoom meeting, so we're going to move on to commissioner comments and questions. Yeah, Commissioner Cutright.
Thanks. Can we get the answers to the questions from?
Yeah, sure. I think you'll have about 5 minutes left of your time.
Sure. Members of the Planning Commission, Patrick Biker, representing Crescent Communities. Long story short, I believe it was Commissioner Cutright. Yeah, the site is quite small, 6.5 acres, and the low-income housing tax credit requires a standalone parcel for every tax credit deal. So you'd have to subdivide 6.5 acres, and it's a fairly small site. Secondly, what's even more important is that it is not in a qualified census tract, and that means a low-income housing tax credit issued by the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency will not generate sufficient revenue to build any quality, the housing of the sufficient quality that we expect to see for persons in income-restricted dwellings in Durham. So it's a lack of financing due to federal regulations that we have no control over, and secondly, the fact that it's a very small site and we would have to subdivide it in order to meet the requirements of the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency. Ted, did you have anything to add to that? No. State your name.
My name is Ted Heilbronn. I'm a principal with Kelly Development Company. Address? 912 Village Crossing Drive, Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We are the affordable developer. It's a part of the team here. What I would add is the reality is that a qualified census tract, as everyone here might be aware of, provides an extra 30% of the low-income housing tax credit financing. And in today's environment, one in which over the last 12 months, interest rates have more than doubled and continue to increase, and construction costs are up effectively 30 to 35%. But on the affordable side, our rents are effectively capped, right? So they're not keeping pace with the cost of capital and cost of construction. Finding projects that pencil is difficult. And so project doesn't pencil, the only mechanism to make it work is to shrink it. And so by utilizing an off-site gap funding mechanism and pulling in a site that is in one of Durham's qualified census tracts, we can build as much as, I would say, 50% more units. So we'd be talking about a project that could be, as in terms of the affordable housing component, as small as 35 to 40 units. Now we're talking about 66 units. We're also talking about likely up to 20 affordable for sale units as a part of this by pulling in real estate that goes to Habitat. So by leveraging this sort of quirk of the way that HUD designates census tracts and allocates funding to affordable developments, the frank truth is that we can build more affordable, substantially more affordable. And so that is the direction that this project is taking.
I appreciate that. Couple things I want to reconcile here. The Carver Street that was approved last year, I thought said it was 198 units. So maybe help me understand that disconnect between the 66 that we're talking about here and the 198. The other piece of this is, can you do affordable that doesn't have to be LIHTC and build those on site? We don't have to do a LIHTC deal to put some affordable units on this particular site.
Yes, I'll take those in order. The Carver Street Assemblage project has 198 income-restricted rental units on it. We were successful in securing a gap funding award this past summer, in the summer of '22, from the city of Durham for the first 132 units. And so these last 66 will complete the 198 units of income-restricted, 4% LIHTC funded housing. And on that note, our final tax credit application for the 132 units has just this week been accepted by North Carolina Housing Finance Agency. And so we're moving to pulling building permits, and we'll have a shovel in the ground by the end of the summer. So that's exciting. And our hope is that with the pace that this development agreement and the funding from it would come into play, that we'd be able to break ground simultaneously on the full 198. And I am all over the place, so I forgot your second question. Oh, why use the LIHTC? So the truth is, you get two kinds of tax credits, 9% and 4% credits. 9% credits pay for a large portion of the project. They're super competitive. Durham gets one a year, tops, by the way the state sets its rules. 4% LIHTC, which is the funding mechanism that we're using to build here, pays for about 40% of the costs of construction. If you do not use LIHTC, it is substantially more difficult to build affordable housing because you're not getting what is otherwise free capital in the form of tax credits that we get from the federal government and then sell to investors. And so the truth is housing, the affordable units either come in with less affordability, right? So people aren't making a commitment to 60% AMI. They're committing to 80. They're committing to 100% AMI rents, which are substantially more expensive than 60% AMI rents. So it's either less affordable or there are far fewer units built. And so by extension, the percentage of the total units of the project that you might see if affordable not funded via the LIHTC program was included in the Novel Hill project, it could be 10% or less. And the rents might be substantially greater than 60% simply because you're not getting the millions of dollars worth of tax credit funding that helps make affordable developments pencil.
Thanks, I get that, I appreciate that. I guess where I'm going is I wasn't thinking about replacing the 66 that you already, or that you're committing to on the Carver Street, but in addition to, 5% or some number of units on site, it feels like that should be possible, but I haven't seen your financials and whether that pencils or not, but just a thought.
So let me take one more stab at this, and I don't want to put words in Crescent's mouth. At the end of the day, it is their project. It is their money that's being committed to the affordable development that would be in Bragtown. But what I would say is that what's really unique here is that Crescent is willing to tie the CO on 400 market rate units, which is a very, very expensive project with a bunch of capital that they'll end up investing, to our ability to pull COs for the LIHTC development. And again, we talked for a second previously about how interest rates have gone bananas in the last 12 months, construction pricing's run all over the place. The truth of the matter is that happens again in the next 9 months. Crescent's signing up to fund that gap, because if our project doesn't get built, regardless of the size of the gap, then Crescent can't move forward with their development. And so the gap today is the neighborhood of that $2.6 to $3 million number. It could balloon to 5, it could balloon to 7, right? And Crescent's on the hook for that. And so on top of that sort of open-ended financial commitment, I think that the ask to commit to more affordability on site is difficult to stomach. And to add, as an affordable developer, particularly in this context in which Durham has had to top off gap funding awards it's already made to affordable deals because of this terrible environment that we're in for developing affordable. Durham does not have money to top off affordable projects, and so finding a private gap funding partner who's willing to cut that open-ended check is very, very rare and sets a precedent that we think is beneficial to building more affordable across the city.
Commissioner Morgan?
I had a question for the applicant. Is there any kind of design considerations for the 400 units on how you, are you including any of those type of commitments within the proposal?
There was some general language, Commissioner Morgan, but again, Crescent has a track record that really does speak for itself. So in terms of the quality of the units and being harmonious with the development that you see in the background of the slide, we're 100% confident that will be the case.
Okay.
I believe we committed to no vinyl siding, if that makes you feel any better.
Yeah, and I'm familiar with the developments in Charlotte, so.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Other questions, comments? Commissioner Cease?
Thank you. I have a question, or maybe more just a general request for staff to elaborate a bit on the 3 specific staff concerns that were identified in the report. I think it would be helpful for everyone to kind of hear a bit about what staff could say on those 3 points.
Absolutely. Thank you. Alexander Cahill, Planning Department. So staff have had some concerns throughout this negotiation process. Some of them, the concerns are in line with best practices or evidence-based research in terms of planning best practices. Some of are in line with community goals and objectives. One of the community goals and objectives really speaks to mixed income development. And initially, there was a different site proposed, and we were hoping to get the affordable units as part of the market rates. That was what staff was hoping for. We know that mixed income housing provides for safer environments, offer a greater range of possibilities. When it's sited in revitalized neighborhoods, mixed income developments may be an effective tool for promoting economic development across the spectrum and continuum. And then also the inclusion of market rate housing with affordable housing usually makes it more acceptable to those who otherwise oppose such projects, so it helps change that paradigm or narrative. In addition, there were some concerns about the mechanism for the donation to Habitat for Humanity around well and septic. So there's no mechanism in this development agreement that ensures that that if these parcels remain in the county, they would be served by well and septic, which can create an undue burden and add additional expenses and maintenance cost. So staff would like or have encouraged through this negotiation process with the development agreement to include the annexation of said properties as a condition of this agreement, which is not currently part of it. And the third point or last part is the precedent. We understand that funding affordable housing is the most important part of this process, and getting the Carver Street units built and funded is incredibly important to Bragtown community. At the end of the day, that's what's most important. We've been a little concerned throughout the process, not just planning, but also community development, that these units aren't on site or they're not tied to a project that wasn't approved yet. One of the concerns that we raised around that is that when a proffer is made for Planning Commission or City Council around affordable housing, there's an expectation essentially that those units will get built within the project. That didn't happen. Ted did a great job of laying out the change in dynamic of the economy and why that's becoming an issue for some of these commitments, but we're also a little concerned about the precedent this sets going forward.
Great, thank you. For going through each of those and for adding the context about perhaps the initial conversations around this, including another site. I think that's important too. And it's important, and especially in my mind, we've heard now from several different perspectives from Commissioner Cutright, from some of the community members who represent perhaps different perspectives, some being developers, some being more interested at the neighborhood scale, from Ms. Kessler and Mr. Anthony, and also from staff, have all referenced this concern about having the affordable not being located with the 400 units on site that we're discussing. And I think that that's one of the concerning precedents, is what I heard, correct? It's certainly my concern. The precedent that it sets up for potentially tying projects that already have approvals from a land use perspective to yet another project elsewhere in the city. And so I appreciate the discussion and the vastly, the much different environment that we're in now than we were a year or so ago, financing-wise, construction-wise, et cetera, and housing needs. But I really do think that if we look at this both from a land use perspective, it's not a favorable case. If we look at it from a housing perspective, sure, it can be perceived to be a favorable case, I believe. There are a lot of benefits. But from a land use perspective, from the community goals and objectives that have been adopted by the city, placing, providing any mechanism that encourages the creation of market rate housing in one location that is rich with amenities and opportunities and jobs. We heard from the DA representative, and placing the affordable housing elsewhere in the city, across the city. I think that's just a bad precedent. That's one concern I have. The other concern, and these are just concerns, is something that seems pretty straightforward from what staff has expressed, and that is in some way tying the annexation of the parcels being donated to Habitat, tying that to this development agreement. Why is that not something that the applicant is considering?
If the question is a concern about whether or not we'd be happy to annex the parcels in as a requirement before donation to Habitat, that's fine. We have no issues with that. The reason the Habitat parcels are in this conversation is because when the financing conundrum precluded us from building a consequential amount of on-site affordable and forced us to think more creatively about how we could leverage the same amount of dollars and stretch them farther into more units, our first thought was, in consultation with staff, well, our group has 6 acres or 5.5 acres of real estate off-site. Why don't we build there? Well, the issue is that those parcels aren't zoned. And so to go through a full zoning process, that's 12 months. We've got to pull a site plan, that's another 10 to 12 months. Then we got to pull building permits. And so these units, the same amount of units, would come 18 months later than the units associated with the Carver plan, which we're talking about now. And we spend a whole ton of time with folks in Bragtown. We've got other potential affordable developments they're working on with both Habitat and the community. And all we hear from folks is that they need affordable now, not tomorrow, not 18 months from now, not, longer, obviously. We were encouraged by elected officials to consider the possibility of, instead of funding or having Crescent fund affordable on the 6 acres, why don't we give that 6 acres to Habitat? They could build affordable for sale there, and then we could subsequently get affordable units into the community 18 months faster. And so the original consideration was to not have Habitat involved, and then the opportunity emerged to link Habitat in so that there was just this kind of simultaneous benefit of more units, more affordability, coming to the community faster, and affordable for sale as a part of the same development.
Right, and Patrick Biker, again, to follow up on the annexation, there's we'd be happy to work with Mr. Cahill and his team to simply amend the paragraph at the top of page 8 that right now it says developer shall cause the donation of the parcels to Habitat for Humanity. Just say developer shall cause the annexation and donation of the parcels to Habitat for Humanity. That's a simple fix, sir.
Well, that would be helpful, I think, from the perspective of alleviating at least one of the 3 primary concerns, and it's a concern I have from the perspective of donating to an affordable housing developer here in the city, but yet also burdening them with that process. And I think any burden associated with that annexation.
We're happy to alleviate that burden.
Yeah, well, but please do that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? So I have some comments. I should start by saying I'm for this. I want this to happen. Like, we need the units. That said, I also have a lot of concerns about the precedent this sets, and also, to me, it's just an odd way for a city to do business in general. So this isn't really about the applicant. Like, I appreciate, Ted, the innovation, the work that you've done to make this happen. So I don't want any of my comments to be reflective of the work that you and the applicant team have done. I imagine if this case, instead of 400 multifamily units, was 400 townhomes or 400 single-family units, and we felt like our hands were tied and we needed to approve it so that we could get the gap financing for the affordable development. And that's not a situation I want to be put in. But to my point about it being a weird way to do business, I know, Patrick, you made a comment of this is happening with the city contributing $0, and I do commend that. However, I think that that's what the city should be doing. That's what the role of the government is to provide public benefits and provide public service. And so I really hope that this gets addressed in our next budget cycle so that our gap financing program is robust enough that it can fill the gap. So then when we get an opportunity for an additional 400 units, those units are available to be affordable. And we're not having to take away units, potential affordable units from this proposal to fill a gap that the city should be able to fill. And in particular, like, I recognize we have a gap financing program, and it's targeted more at 30% and very low income units, which is good, and I'm glad we have that. We also need something to be able to solve these gaps, particularly in our current financing market. This is something Raleigh has done very well, and I think that they should be commended on the work that they've done with their gap financing program. They passed a 1 cent tax back in, I think, like 2017 to fund gap financing, and it has successfully delivered hundreds and thousands of units since then using the 4% LIHTC gap financing program. So to me, like, this, as many of the cases we see here, is just revealing some of the problems of the broken system that we have, where we don't have the gap financing ready that the city can say, hey, Ted, go just fill the gap, get what you need, and then we can work with this developer to figure out how do we make more units affordable on this case. So that's my primary concern. I think I also do have a concern of, like, we have rezonings come to us all the time, and sometimes they don't ever turn into an actual development. And so there is a part of me that is concerned, like, the contingency here is the financing has to be in place prior to certificates of occupancy happening. Well, what if the market shifts and we decide, you know, there's no development happening here at all? Suddenly the thing that we have said, this is what you get when you provide the financing, isn't there. And so I do actually want to ask that question to the applicant, like, what happens if this project doesn't move forward?
Well, Chairman Amendolia, that's actually a risk with any development. There are two sort of worlds that we have to work in. One is the zoning world, one is the financing world. And they're two very different worlds. There's a saying that to win a horse race, 1,000 things have to go right. To lose a horse race, only one thing has to go wrong. And the same thing's true in real estate development. We're confident this will move forward. We've done the best we can to answer all the contingencies and make sure that this site is ready to move forward to site plan approval and the building permit process. But, for example, the building that's in the background, University Hill, as many of you all know, I've been doing this for a long time. We got that project approved right before the Great Recession. So guess what? It sat there as a vacant lot. Anybody remember Service Merchandise? There was Service Merchandise there back in the good old days. That was a vacant lot for years. So we don't live in a world where there's no risk. But we're confident before you today that this project's going to move forward and that this development agreement will make these 66 income-restricted units happen in Bragtown far faster than any other vehicle that's available for making those units a reality for a neighborhood that sorely needs them and that, again, was unanimously approved. But I appreciate your point, Mr. Chairman. It's very well taken. But the risks of financing are significant with every project you look at, Mr. Chairman. Industrial, residential, commercial, they're all, it's all a challenge. Let's just put it that way. But we're confident before you tonight that this project will move forward and it will be, again, as Mr. Halpern stated, the most efficient and expeditious way to put affordable housing in the Bragtown neighborhood pursuant to the unanimous approvals of this commission and the city council. Thank you.
Just to augment for a second on Patrick's remarks, the truth of the matter is, and this is just an unfortunate reality of the world we're in today, every affordable housing development financed with the LIHTC program and a 4% credit has a gap. And so as we think, first of all, we're really confident, which doesn't do planning commission much good, but we've seen Crescent take the kind of action that leads us to believe that they're going to follow through with their project, which allows ours to get financed, right? But as we think about how we solve project gaps, there are really three mechanisms. The first is city gap funding, right? And Durham has been a leader in this space across the state over a long period of time. Raleigh's great, but the truth is the gap funding resources from the bond from 2019 have been fully committed across a wealth of projects across the city. So right now there's not that gap funding resource at a city level. The second path would be a 9% award. And Durham only gets, effectively, due to the way the state writes its laws, one of those a year. There are other projects applying for 9% awards. We could apply with this project, but it would potentially take a 9% award from someone else who then wouldn't be able to build their own affordable. And so the last path is gap funding from a private capital partner. And that's why, as much as this deal has been incredibly complex and has, tried to navigate all the financing craziness of 2022, it's been a worthwhile effort for us because the precedent of having a private developer gap fund LIHTC in the city opens up all sorts of doors for us to get more creative bringing projects forward, as opposed to effectively either applying for nines, of which only one project's going to win a year in Durham County, or hope that more gap funding emerges at a municipal level. So I guess to echo Patrick, there's always a risk that a project doesn't get funded, but out of those three paths, this one we view as the most credible, particularly because we've got a high degree of confidence that Crescent's moving forward.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think my main point is that this city needs more gap financing. And I hope that anyone watching this meeting, any residents, hear that and recognize that and think about that when that request gets made. And I hope it gets made. I hope our city council members request an increase in funding for gap financing. And when that happens, we need to back it, because I don't really love being in a space where developers are doing the city's job. Like, I appreciate that you're doing it, but I don't think that's how it should be working. I think the city needs to do the city's job. And so we need more funding to make this gap financing program work. I think the last thing that came to mind as we're talking through this is, because of the nature of this case, like, we don't get to think about this application by itself like we typically do. Like, typically we look at a case and we're like, oh, we think about the proximity of the units to other amenities and connectivity and sidewalks and and we get to do all of this more detailed, important work. And because of the nature of this case, it's kind of like, it's the affordable units or bust. And I'm going to choose the affordable units, but I don't like the situation it puts us in, because that's become more of the focus. So that's all I have to say on it. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Chigueras.
Yes, excuse me, I have a question about the well and septic for the gift to the Habitat for Humanity. If the city council, you are committing to tying this agreement to annexation into the city, if the city council does not approve annexation, I would like to know, are there perk permits on site for these parcels Because if there are no park permits for each one of these parcels and the city does not annex this is kind of like a white elephant type gift.
Yeah, there are not currently park permits in place for the site. We're in the early stages of figuring out the process of making sure it gets developed in accordance with Habitat's financial needs so they can deliver their product. I think at a certain level, we would find it unlikely that council wouldn't take the step to annex in property that's specifically intended for 80% AMI for sale housing. But no, as of right now, we do not have those in place.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Cease?
Briefly, Chair Amendolia mentioned sidewalks. That typically comes up in our conversations about cases, and so I'm going to mention sidewalks just real briefly, because one of the things that was highlighted as a contribution that you're making in specifically in reference to the University Hill site is the improvement of a bus stop and an improvement of sidewalks. But the route that you've identified crosses Shannon Road twice, crosses Shannon Road, the 5-lane section of Shannon Road twice, which no one will ever do. And it does that, presumably, to avoid having to construct the 500 feet of sidewalk on the eastern side of Shannon Road, which is what path anyone who, in whatever circumstance, they would ever end up taking the bus from the length of the pedestrian route that's identified, that's the path they would take. And so I do think it's important for transportation staff or planning staff, for the commission, for applicants to be cognizant of providing transit improvements where it's creating conditions that are conducive to people who may want to use transit, rather than just creating a line on a paper that satisfies the scenario for a person who may have to use transit. Because I think that's what's being created here if the actual sidewalk on the eastern side of Shannon Road is not included. And that'll be one of my comments, and I wish that the applicant would address that associated with the project. Thank you.
Commissioner Cease, my recollection, it was a right-of-way constraint, and I think we worked hand in glove with Go Triangle and Go Durham and the city's transportation department on the infrastructure recommendations in the development agreement. So those were all worked on, and it was, again, looking at what was possible given right-of-way constraints, topography, and other related facts on the ground.
So I appreciate that response, and it's why I said very specifically that I hope that planning staff, transportation staff, and everyone on our commission, that we take those things more seriously, because it's important.
Yeah, no, our team walked the site very thoroughly. Our engineers, our development team, the Go Triangle, Go Durham folks were very gracious with their time, spending time with us. So this process took a long time, Commissioner Cease. It wasn't like we just turned this in a few months ago. It's been in staff review for a long time.
And your cycling bias comes up. I appreciate that, Patrick. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's been a very, and you saw the fruits of the community engagement from the people who called in. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't call out the staff and appreciate Mr. O'Toole's work, Assistant Director Smith, Ms. Thomas, Mr. Cahill, other folks who worked really hard on this. And on behalf of our team, we very much appreciate it.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? If not, I'd be ready for a motion at this time.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we take case Z2100046, the novel University Hill development agreement, to be forwarded to the City Council with, I guess, the one change for annexation. Is that what we were talking about? The annexation of the Carver Street assemblage into the city, is that?
Of the habitat units.
Yeah, the habitat units.
Correct. Staff just wanted to clarify, too, on that proffer that we will work on the language in the development agreement to ensure that annexation is a mechanism for the city remedies.
Okay, that's my motion.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Morgan, seconded by Vice Chair Cameron. Is there any discussion on the motion? I'm going to quickly close the public hearing because I don't think I did that. And may we have the roll call vote?
Chair Amendolia,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cameron,
Yes.
Commissioner Cutright,
Yes.
Commissioner Shigaris,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrod,
Yes.
Commissioner McIver,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Cease,
Yes.
Commissioner Trapp,
Yes.
Commissioner Valentine,
Yes.
Commissioner Zuri Williams.
Yes.
All right, the motion passes 12-0.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all your time.
Great. Thanks to staff. Thanks to the applicants. Okay, we're going to move to our next public hearing, which is case Z2100016 Shady Grove Assemblage. We'll begin with a staff report.
Good evening, commissioners and those in attendance. Demir Powell, Planning Department. This case is Z21016 Shady Grove Assemblage for a proposed zoning map change. The proposal is located at 2801 Olive Branch Road, 4001 and 4031 Carpenter Pond Road, and 2704 and 2901 Shady Grove Road. The site is within the suburban development tier and is located in the county. An annexation petition, BDG 21-00008, is running concurrently with this proposal to annex the properties into city limits. The proposal includes 6 parcels, which total 78.124 acres that are currently zoned residential rural. And the applicant is proposing to rezone the entire site to planned development residential 5.632 to facilitate the construction of a maximum 440 residential units. The unit types include 8 to 120 single-family detached units and 260 to 320 townhouse units. 5% of these units are proposed as income-restricted units. An additional 5% of single-family lots will be donated to the Habitat for Humanity of Durham. The proposal also includes a dedication of land for a park to the City of Durham for ownership and maintenance. The existing future land use map designation is low-density residential. If the proposal is approved, staff recommend a change to the future land use map designation to be low to medium-density residential. Lastly, this proposal is located in the Falls Jordan District Watershed Protection Overlay and is partially within the A60 Airport Overlay. All parcels on site except 2801 Olive Branch Road and 4031 Carpenter Pond Road are in the airport overlay. The airport overlay includes additional provisions to mitigate any potential impacts and noise exposure from the nearby airport, and also allows the Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority to review proposals within the overlay. The zoning context map shows the proposed planned development residential 5.632 zoning and the zoning of surrounding properties, which is mostly residential rural. There is other PDR zoning within a little over a half mile from the site, including the enclave at Leesville neighborhood, which is shown on the map to the southwest and is zoned PDR 3.170. The aerial map shows the general location of the project and the surrounding development, which is mostly residential. A development plan is included in this proposal. The proposed conditions show the proposed city park located to the southeast of the site, which is surrounded by the proposed residential units. 5 access points are proposed along with the construction of 2 internal streets on site, one being an east-west road from Olive Branch Road to Shady Grove Road, and the other a north-south road from Carpenter Pond Road to the aforementioned newly constructed east-west road on site. There is a stream that extends from the eastern portion of the site, and the applicant has provided the required 100-foot stream buffer and the 10-foot building setback from the buffer edge. The proposed north-south road would cross through this stream. As this site is located within the watershed protection overlay, the proposal provides the required maximum 70% impervious surface area. It also provides 13.28 acres of open space, with 4.43 acres being usable open space. 15.625 acres of tree coverage will also be provided. Lastly, this proposal exceeds UDO requirements for the project boundary buffer, which is 0.2, adjacent to residential rural zoning. The applicant is proposing a 0.4 opacity to the north and south and a 0.8 opacity to the east and west. It also includes a decorative fence along certain portions of the site perimeter. This proposal includes a list of commitments that are summarized as follows. The proposal would limit uses to single-family detached, townhouses, and accessory uses. There are dimensional standards for buildings provided, and it does designate 5% of rental units as affordable housing. The proposal will donate 5% of for-sale constructed single-family lots to Durham Habitat for Humanity or a similar nonprofit entity. BMPs are sized to the 100-year storm event, and decorative perimeter fencing is provided. The proposal will also orient residential units to be rear entry along internal parkways. There is a proposed road widening along Site Access 5, an additional 5 feet for bicycle lanes along Shady Grove Road, Carpenter Pond Road, and Olive Branch Road, and $116,500 are proposed to be donated to Durham Public Schools. East-west and north-south roads are proposed on site, and the proposal is noting to develop a city park with a picnic pavilion, shelter, pickleball courts, natural turf play field, and a playground. There are also traffic improvements that include traffic signals and turn lanes along Carpenter Pond Road, Olive Branch Road, Leesville Road, Shady Grove Road, and Andrews Chapel Road. There is a proposed alignment of Site Drive 4 with Virgil Road to the north of the site. And lastly, they are proposing protected storage along Site Drives 2 and 5. Design commitments include listing the building materials along the front elevation of the buildings, providing at least one front gable in each building, and no single-family home or townhouse will be constructed with a front facade or color palette identical to houses on either side of it, and townhouses will have a minimum 2 windows on the side elevation, front covered stoops, and garage door entries with windows. A neighborhood meeting was held in accordance with UDO requirements on April 7th, 2021. 2 additional meetings were held on August 24th, 2021, and February 1st, 2022, as well as survey responses and 1 comment were provided on Social Pinpoint. Staff determines that this request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted ordinances and policies. The proposal would achieve the following. It would provide market rate and affordable housing, provide transportation improvements, and dedicate land for a public park. The elementary and middle schools serving the site are over capacity, and a large number of students will be generated by the proposal. The applicant has dedicated $116,500 to Durham Public Schools to help mitigate these impacts. The Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority has concerns about the intensity of the development of the area due to potential noise impacts from the airport. There are concerns from neighboring residents about the compatibility of the development and an increase in traffic, and the applicant has exceeded community engagement requirements with additional meetings to address some of these concerns. And staff and the applicant are available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we turn to the applicant presentation, I wanted to recognize Commissioner Morgan, who wanted to make a disclosure ahead of this public hearing.
Yeah, I want to just share with my fellow commissioners that I am an active member of board member on the Raleigh-Durham Airport. I represent Durham County. One of the things that the airport is concerned about is the development close to the airport, and that was the development of these airport overlay districts. However, I spoke to some of the operations people. They're opposed to really any residential development in the A60 overlay district. However, recognizing we've had similar issues with Morrisville and other buildings encroaching upon the airport, we have these different provisions which are in our UDO. So that kind of frees me to objectively look at this opportunity. But they're looking for an aggregation easement granted to the authority, which means these planes can fly over this area at any time, day or night. Sound attenuation for lower interior noise. I know some homes and developments where we actually have that require that the builder actually provide those things to reduce the noise level. And then also full and complete noise level disclosures given to all purchasers before they actually purchase the houses or the units themselves. So given that those are all within our UDO and those are where I've checked out with staff that it is covered, then I can pretty much objectively evaluate the thing. But I wanted to disclose it to my fellow commissioners that I want to definitely follow with whatever the airport staff has requested, and I feel like I'm satisfied with those requirements.
Thank you. With that, we're going to open the public hearing, and we'll begin with the applicant presentation. Applicant will have 10 minutes to give their opening remarks.
Evening, Chair Amendola, members of the Planning Commission. Jared Edens with Edens Investments. I appreciate your time this evening. As always, I appreciate staff's time on this project. Zonings can take 18 months, 24 months plus to get here, so there's a lot of works on all sides to get here, so I'm just glad to be at the meeting. But I think just in general, I think this is a good project and a good location. You know, it's near Briar Creek. There's a lot of density, a lot of growth in the area. As staff mentioned, we're proposing about 440 units over 78 acres. Density of 5.6, which, you know, in the suburban tier, we've seen densities approved up to 20 units an acre in certain parts of town. So I don't consider 5.6 to be an especially dense neighborhood. I want to give you a few highlights and give you some history. Originally, it was going to be a lot denser. It was and I still to this day think that it's a viable apartment site as far as a mixed use between apartments, singles, and towns. And when we went into the project and with the first neighborhood meeting that we had, which was pretty lengthy, a lot of conversation, but there was a lot of conversation about the apartments use. And really, as it played out, when we learned more about Olive Branch Road and plans, you know, for small realignments of that down the road and things like that, the apartments started to make less and less sense. And with the community being so against it, you know, we were at like 600 to 650 units, and we've cut down to about like that 440 number by removing the apartments. So only singles in towns. A few notable commitments, 100-year storm, which I'm glad to see is becoming pretty standard, and we'll be doing that here. I really like the parkway design. So I saw this project as, it's the first parcel outside of Raleigh. I'm on the other side of Shady Grove Road is Raleigh, City of Raleigh residents. And when you come out Leesville Road, it's one of the first Durham parcels you're going to see when you're coming from Raleigh. So I saw it as sort of a gateway kind of project, something that I think we should do a little bit higher than the norm for development there. So our parkway design, those two main internal roads, which is an extension of Virgil Road and then that east-west collector kind of road. It has 10-foot multipurpose paths on each side. It's median divided. It's going to be landscaped, you know, center landscaped with a 10-foot paths. It'll probably be a right-of-way of something around 70 feet to incorporate that. But like I said, I wanted a certain feel. That's the reason we have the condition of, you know, any units along the internal parkway have to be rear entry units, because through the main corridor of the development, I was going for that kind of feel that honestly we talked about at Planning Commission for years, different things that we've been trying to go for. So that's just sort of a mix of some of those ideas. We do have good affordable components. I think we're saying 5% of the for sale single-family lots would go to Habitat. We're actually talking, or our plans are to deal with Habitat for Humanity and Wounded Warriors. That could be up to 6 single-family lots. It's a finished lot. It's not a finished unit. It's a finished lot, but those lots are, you know, it's a ballpark $1 million commitment when you take 6 lots at market rate near Briar Creek. So I thought that was strong. So some smaller commitments. You know, we've got the perimeter buffers that we try to do, the 50-foot buffers. One thing I liked we did here is we added some some perimeter fencing along the buffers, but we placed the fencing on our side of the 50-foot buffer. So if you live along the development, it's going to have the appearance that your property may be 50 feet deeper than it actually is, because we put the fence on our side. So our owners and property owners, they're never going to go beyond that fence likely. So it's a solid buffer that I think won't ever be encroached in. We made a widening proffer. I met with some of our neighbors about the road widening on Carpenter Pond Road. We made a proffer to shift that widening away from their property as much as possible. This is done at construction drawings, but there's just little things that came about from meeting with neighbors. I met with all the adjacent neighbors at their homes all the way around. That's where the buffers and some of this stuff came from. So we've done good work, I think, with the neighbors. Like staff mentioned, 3 meetings. We may have had 4. And I think the most notable commitment is the city park. I've been saying this a while, Durham Parks and Rec, it'd be nice if we could do some more, because you go 10 minutes east and go into Raleigh, and there's a park every 5 minutes in that part of town. And you go to Durham on this side, and there is nada. So that's something I was glad we could do. It's something we're going to build and pay for, dedicate to the city. It's right at the main entrance to the development. It's going to have these 10-foot multipurpose paths leading to it from inside the development. We spoke with Parks and Rec. They actually told us what to put on that cover sheet. This multipurpose field, this is what we want. We said, okay, this is what you get. The multipurpose field is like half the size of a football field. It's like a 50-yard football field, so it's fairly legitimate. I'll speak on traffic real quick. So at its basic level, if you were looking at this site for traffic, you would look at the 3 adjacent roads, Olive Branch, Carpenter Pond, and Shady Grove. You would go to the traffic count, and just on a surface level, you would see, per our staff report, it's not our numbers, per our staff report, you would see counts of 1,700 cars a day. I think one's 2,400 cars a day, and you'll see capacities, just at a surface level, capacities of 10 times that in some places, 10,000 cars a day, 12,000 cars a day when you've got 2,000 cars coming around. As a general rule, we're always fronting DOT roads. You've got to have 4,000 cars a day by general statute before DOT can require a turn lane. So if I was going in with a typical project, 80 units, 1 driveway, Dot Nichols Road, no rezoning, you've got to have 4,000 cars just for DOT to even mention it. So the thresholds that are around here are pretty low compared to what the statewide thresholds are that were established by general statute. I point that out because when you go beyond the surface level and you look at the traffic study we performed, the list, I'm not sure if, and Alex, do they have the updated cover sheet in the package? Okay, so, because we had to update the traffic commitments, but when you look on the cover, there's 3 columns of text commitments, and the 2 columns on the right-hand side are all traffic improvements. And the vast majority of them are stuck to this project. A lot of times you've got a long list of improvements, but they're required by 10 different developers. And there's a couple of those that are on that list, but 70% of those 2 columns is improvements from the traffic study. And that's why I just wanted to point out the relatively low traffic in the area, but with this study, there's signals, there are extensive improvements being put in that'll be tied to the COs of this development. Last thing I'll touch on is the airport. I appreciate David's input and insight on that. He and I talked about that before. All I can say is there's a lot of developments in that overlay. Andrews Chapel's got 600 homes in a very thriving neighborhood with planes flying over every 5 minutes, and it seems to be working out well. So I don't think this will stick out as far as the airport goes, and we're making all the proper protections on the plan. So that's all I got. I'd like to reserve some time for answering questions or neighbor comments, but I appreciate it.
Great, thank you. With that, we'll turn to public comment. We have several folks that have signed up to speak in person. If there's anyone on the Zoom meeting who would like to speak, please go ahead and start raising your hand at this time. For those that signed up in person, I'm just going to read down the names that we have, and you all can come up to the podium, and you'll have 2 minutes each. So we have Bob Hatcher, Pam Andrews, Tom Freeman, David Johnson, Pam Williams, and Donna Steinbeck. You all may kind of come up to the podium one by one. You'll have 2 minutes each. Please state your name and address before starting.
Okay, pardon me. I needed some water. I'm Bob Hatcher. My wife and I, Linda, live on 4114 Carpenter Pond Road. Thank you for allowing me as a commission to speak tonight. We would oppose this development as it stands right now. living directly across the street from it. We are concerned about the traffic, but that is not our main concern. We're especially concerned about three other items. First of all of the drainage on the south side of the property, probably in the neighborhood of 12 to 15 acres, it could be more, will drain actually onto our property. I'm concerned that even a 100-year flood plan will not cover problems, and if there's a problem, every bit of the silt and water will come onto our property. It doesn't go anywhere else along Carpenter Pond Road. I took a few pictures here. I'm not sure if I can do this very quickly. We have to turn it this way. Yeah. This is directly out our driveway. You can see the rise in the property across the street. That's about the centerpiece of the Carpenter Pond section. This is up Carpenter Pond Road to the east. Again, you can see the rise there. All of that washes down onto our property. This is the place directly across on the property that's to be developed. This is a low spot of about 6 or 8 feet right adjacent to the road.
Bob, your 2 minutes are over.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Good evening. Pamela Andrews, 6108 Wake Forest Highway. Thank you for your time tonight. There are many facets to this development that I could speak on tonight, but the topic I'm going to speak on is personal engagement with elderly community members about the blasting in this area. I've worked with the Assistant Fire Chief Jody Morton this week, Assistant Chief Wilcox, as well as I'm going to call him Chief I because I can't pronounce his name, at Olive Branch site. Donna and I met him there this week. These neighbors are being slammed. The little log cabin in this home in this picture she's put up, this is a lady who has lived there for 60 years. She's 80 years old. She is from Chile. When the pre-inspection notification came to her that she could qualify for a pre-inspection, she had no idea what to do with this. Neither did her daughter lives next door who oversees her. She did not get a pre-inspection. You can see a retention pond was blasted right beside her home. There is also right in front of her another major development that is massive. It's been going on for 2 years, blasting still daily. Not to mention a mile down the road, another blasting site on the same road. These people are being slammed with constant blasting to get into the bedrock to make these homes. Imagine the dirt flying all around you, the blast waking up multiple times a week. She asked me when I went to introduce myself to her, what are they doing? Today we've learned that another development is coming just about 200 acres right behind Miss Lily. We are destroying Southeast Durham, folks. Every blast unearths red Triassic Basin soil, which flows into our creeks with readings before Christmas of over 1,000 in turbidity. This runs right into our creek beds. Later I'm going to show you a video tonight of what Lick Creek looks like today. These text amendments that are going to come tonight are so crucial. But let me just tell you very quickly, not one home has been tested in the 24 to 48 hours required in a well permit on the blasting department. City fire department's blasting permit. Not one time has it been tested in 24 to 48 hours. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Up next is Tom Freeman.
Good evening. My name is Tom Freeman. I'm a lifelong resident of Durham. I reside at 1818 Southview Road, Durham. Did I tell you I was a lifelong resident? The assault on Southeast Durham continues. Welcome to the home of constant dynamite blasting. I rise in opposition to the zoning change request. It's a bad plan for a residential community that does not resemble anything in the community. let me invite you to Southeast Durham County so that you can see for yourself what's going on. The site is currently zoned RR, and it's correctly zoned. Our community consists of single-family homes. We have no townhomes in our community. Build RR, and you are welcome. Take this high-density development somewhere else. It is not wanted in our community. It is destroying our community. The high-density development, the mass grading has precipitated the blasting, the erosion of waters into our streams, which go in turn to Falls Lake, directly down Lick Creek, and it is, as you will see later on for yourself, what Lick Creek, a primary tributary to the city of Raleigh's water supply, looks like. It's an embarrassing mess. I will leave my points there, but I do honestly request that you come out and look at my community and look at what's going on. Get out of your cars at some of these sites and you feel the ground shake. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next we have David Johnson.
Appreciate you letting me speak tonight. David Johnson, 4123 Carpenter Pine Road, Durham. I live next door to where the project's going. You know, you can't stop growth and you need growth. But my biggest concern is doing too much at one time. I think the traffic, if you just said 440 units times 2, that's 880 cars. That's not bad. But if you take the whole scheme within a 1.5 to 2 mile area, it's a lot that you've already approved that's going on. And when you compile that with what's already been proposed, today I got a notice across the street, I'm sorry, another 200 acres. That'd be that many cars on a 2-lane road. I don't mind progress at all, but if you can do it in the right way, time it out and plan it and have your infrastructure there and everything you need, I think it works a lot better. And I don't think the neighbors would have a problem with it. Someone said earlier, it's a gateway from Raleigh coming into the area. That's correct. Within a half mile, Raleigh is going to build $50 million tennis courts, racket, pickleball, and all this. Well, you've got that much more traffic that's going to be in that same area. One project, 440 cars, no big deal. When you've got all these projects, and I don't have a clue how many, I would say 3,000 or 4,000 cars a day, and that's just times 2 per unit. That's when it becomes a concern. The only other thing, you were talking earlier, Mr. Amendolia, what if? Around the corner a few years back, had a project going on, 08, 09, bad times hit. The land sat there for a year or more and nothing going on. What is in place? We know hard times may come with everybody talking. What's in place if these projects get halfway done and everybody leaves? Who is protecting the runoff? Who is protecting the whole area with just barren land sitting there? Am I out of time? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Pam Williams.
I'm going to let Donna go ahead and
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. I'm Donna Stainback. I live at 4825 Jimmy Rogers Road in Durham, North Carolina. I'm a lifelong resident of Durham. I am an opponent to this development, and the key concerns are regarding the too large of an acreage to be mass graded, causing excessive runoff in Triassic soil. It's 78.124 acres. Cary and has like 25 acre maximum, and Charlotte has a 20 acre maximum. And there is work being done with the planning department to look at setting maximums for Durham County and Durham City. The impacts of the blasting are not being handled by the blasters in the area. Pam presented a good bit of that. There's too little tree preservation coverage and a minimum for the perimeter buffer, and there's too much cumulative cumulative development in the area, impacting all the infrastructure, including the traffic. There is a lack of detail in the plan as to what is going to be left as the native plant coverage. Now, I wanted to cover that before I went into more detail. The impervious soil maximum is 70%, and that's what's presented in this plan. It's a worst-case percentage. All of these, or most of these percentages for the environment are worst-case percentages being presented in the different plans, the development plan and all. The open space is a minimum of 13.28 acres, and the tree preservation is a minimum. And that's one thing we really do need with all this mass grading is the trees to protect the soil and the runoff. Without any of that, well, you know the rest of the story. Thank you. I don't know why her chart didn't go up on the screen, but anyway. I sent a copy to your emails this afternoon. Oh, it's up. Oh, it's on my screen. It's not on y'all's screen. Okay. My name is Pam Williams. Again, I don't know why it's on my screen and not on y'all's screen. Oh, it's up there. Okay, my name is Pam Williams. I live at 2130 Adventure Trail, Durham, North Carolina. I'm a lifelong resident. I live in this area. There's a couple of things I would like to point out. I appreciate the boundary buffers of 50 feet that they are proposing, and the interior fencing around some of the boundaries. But along the streets, they're not. They're using the minimum boundary buffer, which is 20 feet, and also the minimum opacity. I would like to request a 30-foot minimum on the perimeters and at least a 0.6 or 0.8. We need this to preserve what is out there now. It is not fencing and hardscape there now on this property. It is trees. I also would like to request that the boundary buffers be natural boundary buffers and that they not grade to the property lines, just as you saw in Pam's picture, where they grade to the property line and then they come in and they put in some trees for that 20-foot buffer. What you see on this, on the screen, that is, all that's in blue and black is the developments that have been approved by the city council in the last year, year and a half, and they're just starting construction, they're grading. In southeast Durham, suburban southeast Durham, there's only 8,600 acres. Right now, we have right at 1,000 acres under land disturbance permit and being graded, blasting, whatever out there. 1,000 acres in southeast Durham. This list that was in the TIA did not include the ones that are in red, the 5909 Leesville, the 1409 Doc Nichols, the 5202 Leesville, the courtyard at Doc Nichols that have been approved already by the city council. As you can see, that's close to 5,800 dwellings, 49,000 vehicle trips per day, and that's per the TIA. That's not numbers I made up. There's also several other developments in this area, like Shady Grove, 3,700. Griffith Track would have about 3,000 ADT. Virgil Road, around 5,600. 1604 Olive Branch, 1301 Doc Nichols, and of course Kemp Road, which again would add 5,400 vehicles out here. That would be close to 70,000 additional trips per day in this area in southeast Durham on these roads, Leesville, Doc Nichols, Carpenter Pond, Shady Grove, within probably by 2026. The build out for most of these are 2026, although we didn't know what the build out for this one. There wasn't a schedule in it, so if you could tell us that. But I want to bring to your attention, yes, this may not have but a couple of thousand, but we have a lot of chaos out here going on. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a few people who have raised their hand to speak in the Zoom meeting. We'll turn to them at this time. We'll start with Aaron Villeneuve. Aaron, you'll have 2 minutes to provide comments. Please state your name and address and make your comments.
Hi, my name is Aaron Villeneuve. I live at 5710 Severn Grove Drive. I'm in the Bennington neighborhood, which is right across the street from the proposed development. As I'm sure you can hear in the background, I'm the mother of a young son, a 1-year-old who's getting ready for bed. The positive about this plan is I am appreciative of the park. As someone said earlier, there aren't any parks out here. It's desperately needed. The negatives to this, as has been said before, the traffic, these are rural roads. They are not made for the increased traffic that all of this development is bringing. If you look at the school map that is currently Spring Valley Elementary is the current school, currently overcrowded. The number of developments being planned there would essentially double the number of students at that elementary school. So we desperately need another elementary school built, planned, ready to go before we start building. I understand that you want to build first, get the tax dollars, all of that, but we need this infrastructure in place. The services as well, the concern about the fire emergency EMS response times already lagging, adding more people to this community, to this area, adding that traffic is going to also cause those delays. So these are a lot of the concerns that I'm trying to talk very quickly about all of them. But I would really like to hear more from the council and the city planning about the schools, the traffic, before we keep approving these developments. I'm not anti-development. I just want it planned out in a responsible manner that is holding up the infrastructure for the current community members as well as the.
Aaron, your 2 minutes are up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mimi Kessler.
Hi there, it's Mimi Kessler. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have a couple of things. First of all, on page 4, it talks about the water connection and capacity and the sewer connection and capacity, and it says that it's still in progress. So I don't know what that means, but I do have concerns on a general basis about our ability to supply water and sewer to all of these new kitchen sinks and toilets that are being created in this area. I also have concerns related to how much development is going on in this geographic area. I agree with the residents there that there's like too much construction going on. And I keep wanting to know why we can't somehow require the developers to spread out like what I'm trying to say is one developer has to be finished with blasting before the next developer can start blasting. And I don't see any kind of sequential route here where we can work on the cumulative effect of all of this development in one area. So that's all I have to say. I just don't think that this is, I don't think there should be any more development in this area for some period of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rebecca Freeman. Rebecca, you'll have 2 minutes. Please state your name and address and make your comments.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Rebecca Freeman. I reside at 1818 Southview Road in Southeast Durham. I disagree with the request to change the zoning designation of these 6 parcels of land totaling 78.124 acres to a high density to lower to medium of PDR 5.632. This plan should be developed, if at all, consistent with the future land use map designated by the city at less than PDR 4. not packaging and sandwiching housing together to get a higher density than most, if not all, the developments around in that area. Commuting to work, school, and shopping requires many families to have 2 or more vehicles. This high-density development will significantly add to the already congested areas in southeast Durham that Pam Williams talked about before. Reference the traffic analysis with the many developments in consideration, as she mentioned, and it's over 20 already that is going on now. With so much construction underway, many turn lanes and traffic lanes are recommended, but the roads in this area were constructed many years ago for the rural setting and are narrow with minimal shoulders and may pose safety hazards with heavier traffic loads and congestion from all the new developments. Roads sorely need upgrading more than just turn lanes and traffic lights. The development plan, I believe, specifies a maximum of 35-foot high buildings, if I'm correct, but no details about what that means. I'm assuming there will be 3-story townhomes, maybe. The taller homes will be out of place in this area of southeast Durham for the small footprint of this development site. Finally, I could not locate information about sidewalks, and I heard Mr. Edens speak just a moment ago about paths. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but sidewalks are just as important and maybe more important than bike lanes to the residents of any development. And they should be on both sides of every street in the development.
Rebecca, your 2 minutes are over.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Michelle Bridgers. Michelle, you'll have 2 minutes to provide your comments.
Hello, I'm actually Jesse Bridgers, Michelle's husband. I'm using her phone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I live at 3909 Carpenter Pond Road. Just found out today that not only are we getting developed on 2 sides of us, the back and the left side, but now we're also getting another development directly in front of us. I'm not particularly opposed to development. I do miss the privacy that, the woods land has given us, but my main concern is with drainage and erosion. As you saw in the picture from one of my neighbors, the very first man to speak, all of the wash off from the road goes into the ditch banks and is literally coming to the edge of my property and turns back into my property and across my neighbor's yard as well. I have a septic system and a well system. So I get all of my family's drinking water from a well, and all of my waste is pumped into a drainage field that we take very good care of. My worry is that with all of the water pouring onto my property from this new development, from the lack of trees absorbing it, that my well water will become undrinkable. And I just haven't heard any considerations of how to fix that problem with the erosion and the water, and he seems really nice. I just haven't seen any plans about it. So I'm not against or in agreement with what's going on, but I just want to kind of have a plan of what we're going to do about the water issue and the water table, because that's what I use to drink off of, and my family does. So I'd like to hear some planning about that at some point. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this case? If you're in the Zoom meeting, please raise your hand at this time if you'd like to speak. Okay, seeing none, Mr. Edens, you had about 3.5 minutes left of your time. You can respond to any comments.
Yeah, thank you. I was taking notes. So Mr. Hatcher mentioned stormwater. Obviously, stormwater is a big concern for everybody. It's why Durham Stormwater Code is probably one of the thicker parts of the code. A lot of restrictions in Durham. But, we're committing to the 100-year ponds, and what that means is the post-development flow rate has to be less than the pre-development flow rate for the 100-year event post-construction. So by ordinance, and with the multitude of city stormwater reviewers who look at the projects throughout, we have to have less drainage. By ordinance, we're supposed to have less drainage than what we have currently. So if there's flooding issues generally, although development adds tons of drainage, when the ponds are twice the size as what they used to be to detain, then that offsets that issue. Blasting. Blasting comes up a lot. Blasting is a function of topography, lots of things, but I don't think blasting is a function of use. I don't think a land use decision is, I don't think blasting is part of a land use decision. If I develop a farm out there and I want to grade it to drain a certain way, I'm going to blast just as much rock developing a farm with cows on it as I will with a development, if that's what I want to do. If I want to do an office park, industrial, retail, single family, even by right, RR zoning. Rural residential, which made sense before the city spent $35 million to bring utilities to the area. But now that that investment has been made, that's why you're seeing all these changes. RR in this site, 1.2 units an acre is probably about 95 single-family homes, over 78 acres. So we can have 95 homes that look very well placed for other areas. I always say Cary, that's what we're heading towards. We can have 95 of those by right. People say, well, we welcome it. Welcome RR. Well, but I don't welcome the price points of the RR product. That's why we're here trying to change it. And I don't think that when you're buying a home in the area with less choices, you want to appreciate those comps that your broker runs for you when you try to go get your loan and things like that. So I think the alternate on this site near Briar Creek, near the aforementioned tennis facility, which we don't have that in Durham. So we have Durham residents that now have access to a massive tennis facility down the road, with a significant number of residents. So density makes more sense here than less. Mass grading, I spoke to that before. To me, that's a flip phone versus an iPhone. When I was constructing 20 years ago, it was flip phone, and we graded lot by lot. And now we have iPhones, and we mass grade, and it brings construction costs way down and allows us to control this stormwater that we're so eager to control. If I don't mass grade the site, how do I tell the water where to go? And that gets pretty tough. So when you got to have ponds and you're promising 100-year detention, I got to be able to route the water to those ponds. And mass grading, I'll go down forever on mass grading argument. That's a killer. So I address that the same way, every time. Fire EMS response, I appreciate Erin's comments. I think she's in the Raleigh section across the street, but I think when Durham does their annexations, they analyze fire and EMS, they analyze their response times, where the local, there's been a fire station issue come up near 98. So anyway, I just want to answer some of those and be glad to answer your questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Evans. With that, we'll turn to Commissioner question and comment. Who would like to start? Commissioner Morgan.
Yeah, I have a few comments and then a few questions for the applicant. One of the things that I'm noticing is I'm kind of a bug on street maps and trying to look at it, but we seem to have sort of a vortex of Leesville Road, Olive Branch, Shady Grove, all kind of coming to this four-way stop. And I'll steal a comment from my fellow commissioner who's not here today, Commissioner Williams. I drive that road every day, and it is busy already. Before COVID, that traffic would get backed up at that four-way stop. And during COVID, it kind of died down, and then as it's picked up again, there's a lot of traffic, and a lot of the building that's going on is adding to it. So my concern is the traffic or the new residents on Olive Branch, certainly new residents on Leesville Road, even coming from my community, which I'm in Carolina Arbors. I go there almost every other day because my father lives in Raleigh. So I travel that every day. And so I have some personal concerns about this is actually coming in as a vortex. The city of Raleigh has a couple right-of-ways. One is for New Leesville Road, which is coming up out of Raleigh and Wake County, and also even Leesville Road. And so there's an opportunity, in my opinion, for the city to get involved and to do something to help solve some of these traffic issues. We can't depend on the developers. I'm kind of stealing a comment from you, Mr. Chair, about we can't let the developers kind of completely solve all our problems. I think there's places where the city should step up, and we should actually do that. And so my concern is because of the right-of-ways coming from Wake County and from the city of Raleigh, as well as the current road structures, I think it's about time. We're looking at 400 homes here. I got another neighborhood development across the Carpenter Pond for another 600. And that's all in addition to what was actually presented today by some of the concerns there. We've got a lot of new homes coming up, a lot of new residents, and that isn't even done yet. So whatever's there now is only going to get worse. So that's my concern about that. The question I have for the applicant, Jared, when I was looking at the airport overlay districts, A60, and the provisions that we have for the parcels that are within the A60 overlay district, would you consider a proffer to be consistent with those extra 2 parcels, not make them A60, but at least do the same things that we're asking for, such as the flyover rights, the I can't remember how you do it, but the construction where you make sure that the sound isn't there, as well as disclosing to potential buyers that they're in a sort of a path. I mean, when we talk about these overlay districts, we talk about a real area which is in that corridor, but that doesn't count for the number of planes approaching a particular runway at a particular time. And so A60 is an average decimal level. It doesn't count for single flights time after time after time who are staging coming into the runway off of Terminal 2. So would that be something that you all would consider? I think it would be good for your builder to be consistent across the board, because you're going to have a neighbor buying a home that's in the district and then another one across the way, and they're going to start saying, well, why didn't you disclose this? Why didn't you not disclose that? Would that be something to consider?
I think it's a really good suggestion, to be honest, for consistency, building materials, and those homes are still going to hear the planes, whether they're inside the overlay or not, like you say. So I think it's a good suggestion and something we can incorporate as far as, I think what we're saying by incorporating is these standard notes that would go on a plat and the certain disclosures at title transfer or whatnot. If that's what we're talking about, then yeah, we could apply that to, it's the 2 westernmost parcels that are not in it now.
Yeah, staff's okay with that. Just, we want to clarify it's the time of title transfer, it's the time of sale, and it isn't related to the ordinance itself, just to clarify.
Right, I don't know whether we could zone it that way, I guess, if we wanted to, but I don't see any change there. When I did talk to our operations folks at the airport, they don't see it, even with the new runway that's going to be built in the next 5 years or so. They're not changing the overlay district, so they're not asking for that anyway. But at least from consistency from a builder perspective is to have the same kind of disclosures. And I have that in my neighborhood all the time, where people, we have a lot of planes flying over. I get emails saying, why weren't we told? And we're not in the overlay district, so that's why. Okay? Is that something that can be done?
So to clarify, the applicant's committing it to, at the time of sale, or whoever the seller is, to...
And to do the building for whatever soundproofing.
Correct. That is at the time of sale. That we definitely can have a note on the plat, but that is not a commitment that's related to the ordinance for a development plan.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's kind of all I have. I do think that we need a partnership. That's really what I'm looking for, is with the different municipalities. We're kind of at a, we have 2 cities, 2 counties, and all that kind of stuff kind of coming together. So we need that kind of cooperation.
Other questions, comments?
I have a question. I notice on the other side of Shady Grove Road, there's development. I guess that would be, according to the map, page 15 of 42 from the city staff presentation. And it's I drove out there and I looked around this area. That is, while it's still within Durham County, had City of Raleigh. So that's, I'm assuming, City of Raleigh in Durham County. You were talking about the City of Raleigh right away. So could Raleigh extend technically into this proposed area? Does anybody know?
Grace Smith with the Planning Department. There is a portion that's across the road that is already in the Raleigh city limits. Was it Exeter, I think, that's over there? Or I didn't look at the map, but it's in the city limits. We have an annexation agreement that we have with Raleigh where we agree who can annex where. So if Raleigh wants to come into Durham County, we have that laid out in an annexation agreement. And so they've already annexed what's allowed on that side that's in Durham County. I'm not 100% sure how much more is left. I'd have to look at the agreement area. But there's an agreement, and it's between the two jurisdictions, the city of Raleigh and city of Durham, on who gets to annex where if it's not in their county, and how that works. So,
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Harrod.
Thank you, Chair. Jared, does a Lick Creek Greenway come through this property?
Lick Creek Greenway?
Greenway, yeah.
I don't think so.
The proposed.
I don't think so.
Okay, in the staff report, it said something about that.
I could be wrong. I wasn't aware of the, we didn't have to allocate any kind of corridor or anything. And normally they run down sewer easements and stuff, and we didn't have to deal with that in the SUDs or the extension agreement. I could be wrong.
Correct.
In the Durham Trails and Greenway Master Plan, there is a big area that's designated for the Lick Creek Greenway, but there are no standards that need to be applied to them for them to uphold.
Okay. Well, I think I don't know where you've added some features since the neighborhood meetings. I mean, you do have wider buffers and higher opacities than required in some cases. But the traffic, I could see is a big concern. And you have down here something about Olive Branch Road improvements. What does that refer to? On the DV2.
On the cover page that has all the text commitments?
No, it's just a comment, really, a note on the DV2 plan. Olive Branch Road improvements. I just wonder what.
Oh, I think that's actually stray text that was supposed to be removed. Because Olive Branch, we thought was going to realign across the southern part of the property early on in the project. Then, like David alluded to, we were notified of the different alignments that had already been acquired by the city of Raleigh, so that took that Olive Branch off the table. But I think that text hung around on the plan, so that should be gone.
Is that a committed thing by the city of Raleigh?
Well, like David said, there's been right-of-way that's been acquired for Leesville Road, for a realignment of Leesville Road in Raleigh. And then North Exeter Way in Raleigh eventually ties into Olive Branch, but it'll be south of our parcel, so that there's no real Olive Branch corridor or anything that we're doing other than putting a driveway to it. Maybe Earlene can help us out here. Yeah.
Earlene Thomas, Transportation Department. I believe you're looking at the older version of the development plan.
Oh.
So those Olive Branch realignment and improvements should no longer be a part because the MPO removed that as a part of the long-range plan.
Okay.
In coordination with the City of Raleigh's MPO.
Thank you. Okay, that's the extent of my questions.
Yep, Commissioner Cartwright.
I think I want to take a moment here to point out that, at least from my perspective, I feel like this is a really good project. There's a lot of good things about the project itself. There's some, affordable housing, I think the design, caveat is I'm not a land planner, but with the sort of collector roads and the design that's happening there, you know, the unit types, I think this could make for a really good project itself. It's tough, and we're in this position regularly when you have an individual development that points out or that causes us to see the issues that we have as a planning organization or as a city, right? When that's broader traffic impacts, broader environmental impacts. And so it's tough to bifurcate an individual project from the broader issues. And I think that's what we're facing here is we have some broader issues that are maybe exacerbated or brought to light by this individual project. I don't know the solution to that except to call it out and make note of it, but I think the project itself is doing a good job for the land and the land use. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. We're coming up on our 2-hour mark, and I do have a couple of questions. So we're going to go ahead and recess at this time, and we will return at 7:40 p.m.
We're proud to announce more recognition for our sustainability accomplishments. Our organization and Durham County government have jointly achieved Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, or LEED, Gold certification. The certification is through the U.S. Green Building Council's LEED for Cities and Communities rating system. We achieved this designation for implementing practical and measurable strategies and solutions aimed at improving sustainability and quality of life for our residents. Some of our notable initiatives include reducing our carbon footprint, even as the local economy grows and our population increases, and working to make neighborhoods more resilient to the effects of climate change by making homes more energy efficient, installing rain gardens, and planting trees. The designation makes us the first multi-jurisdictional certified community in the country. Find out more at durhamnc.gov/822.
Summer, let's get started with you. I know you lead the city's sustainability efforts. And overall, what is your goal when it comes to building and maintaining the city's properties?
So we exist in the General Services Department for the city, and the General Services Department is responsible for constructing, operating, and maintaining high-quality city facilities that are visually appealing, but also sustainable. And we do that using all the divisions within the department, facilities, project management. We work with the departments across the city in partnership with the combined goal of increasing our energy efficiency and improving the renewable energy use in our city facilities.
What are our clean energy goals now, and and how was it impacted by this first plan?
Oh yeah, so the Carbon Neutrality and Renewable Energy Action Plan really sets forth two bold and ambitious goals. It makes us a leader in this space. We're one of the first communities in North Carolina to commit to 100% carbon neutrality in city operations by 2040 and 100% renewable energy sourcing in city operations by 2050.
We don't always agree who to pull for on game day, but we all can agree that litter is bad for North Carolina.
See a pothole? There's an app for that. Missed pickup? There's an app for that. Need to set up water service? There's an app for that too. Introducing the One Call app. Report your service requests online on your schedule. Just download for free from the App Store or Google Play Store. Then, sign up and start using it to report problems, check the status of your service request, or just find out more information. Try the Durham One Call app today.
Gary, I thought we could be gone by break.
All right, we're going to return from recess. I have a couple of questions I'm going to ask quickly, and then I'd like to move on. The first, I'll go ahead and ask it of staff. So there's the text amendment we have tonight on soil erosion, and then there's another text amendment that just came through JCCPC on the phasing and mass grading and how that's going to get kind of revamped. Those are presumably going to be approved after this case moves forward, and I'm curious how that's going to align with this proposal being subject to those new text amendments.
Hey, thank you, Chair Amendolia. Alexander Cahill, Planning Department. So you're correct. The erosion sediment control text amendment is at Planning Commission tonight. It's the last item. Tracking potentially in February or March for approval at the city or county if they choose to approve it. Those commitments, we've seen commitments on, let me frame it this way. We've seen commitments on other cases of things that will be in the text amendments and that they're proffering on other cases before the text amendment, just to ensure that they have to comply. So we've seen that happen in other cases. In terms of the phased grading and tree preservation amendment, I think that one's going to take a little more work, and it's going to maybe be in a slightly longer time frame than the erosion sediment control one. And so more likely those wouldn't apply to this case, correct?
Okay, thank you. And then, so I have a couple of questions for Mr. Edens. First, I'm not sure how familiar you are with those two text amendments yet because they haven't been approved yet, but I'm curious just briefly if you have already thought about incorporating some of those requirements into this proposal, and if not, if you would between now and when this moves forward to council.
Yes, I'm more familiar with the mass grading one than the erosion one because I focus more. I think the mass grading one's has a bigger impact. I know the erosion has some things like double silt fence, which we can add gladly. We did that on our last zoning. Small things like that we'd be glad to do. That on the mass grading, I personally, I've got some real issues with the draft of that code as written and what its effect would be on density and cost down the road. So I know what some of that stuff is proposed. I wouldn't want to voluntarily commit myself to any of those things because I think that even what's drafted now is going to change before it's voted on. So people might be committing to conditions that may not be part of the text when it's actually voted on. So I could do the erosion though, for sure.
Yeah, I think that would be good and understood on the other. The other question I had for you was in regards to, you mentioned that Olive Road branch kind of went into the calculation to reduce density from your original plans. And I just wanted to ask kind of like, how did that factor in? It's not often that we see density reduced because of roadway capacity. And so I kind of wanted to get a clarification on why Olive Branch Road was a factor in the density on site.
Yeah, it's not often I reduce density at all, so I've lost sleep over even suggesting to cut density. But it was really a function. So our original plans, we had designed Olive Branch Road to realign through the southern part of the parcel and ultimately line up with Angel Vale, which you'll see on that sheet 2 of that plan set. Angel Vale is the second drive to the north on the eastern side of Shady Grove. So our original plan was to do a much more extensive Olive Branch realignment, tie in there, and that sort of created a pod for the apartments. I was going to put the apartments on the southern side of that pod that Olive Branch created. We got into the review and also neighborhood feedback. I mean, the apartments were not, not well received at all, and I understood some of the concerns. And when you've got that combined with, staff was directing us on, well, this is actually DOT's got this plan and city's got this plan for how the intersection gets reconstructed. All the Olive Branch realignment and all that control we had of street frontage of Olive Branch and how we would plan around it, all that went away when the realignment went away. So it left us with the one big pod, not as good as separators as I wanted, so we just condensed a little on the density.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted that point to be clarified, that the capacity of Olive Branch Road is not the issue at hand in regards to the density. It's about design of the streetscape and whatnot. Alexander, I see you've come up. Did you have any other comments you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that I heard Mr. Eden say that they'll commit to the elements of the erosion and sediment control text amendment. I want to make sure that we're clear on what those three things are. It's the oversizing of the sediment basins, the use of the double silt fence, and the introduction of flocculants.
Yeah, all three, that's good. Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And yeah, so I wanted to really drill down on that point, because when you said that it was going to be higher density and now it's not, that was frankly really disappointing to me, particularly because of the proximity of this site to Briar Creek Road. And a lot of the things that we want to see in this part of Durham, which is more access to transit, more walkability, more opportunity for a mix of uses, they depend on more density happening. And so I appreciate that the kind of geometry of the site changed, and I appreciate that you are working with the neighbors to create something more palatable for them. That said, I think that my guess is when city council hears this, they're also going to feel a little frustrated of like, man, we could have had so much more. And I think that that is not a helpful message to get us where we really want to be, which is not less development, it's better development. And I really hope that, this doesn't set like a precedent of cases getting less dense throughout the course of their life because of opposition, because I think that that ultimately is not the direction we need to be going. I think that's going to continue to exacerbate the problems we have, and it's not really what a lot of us have been pushing for in this part of Durham. We've been pushing for smarter development, for doing more on less space, like Commissioner Cease has said in the past. And so I do feel like this is somewhat of a missed opportunity, because I also imagine you're doing 5% affordable units. If some of those were apartments, then we get a mix of rental affordable, a mix of for sale affordable. Like, that is true mixed use or mixed residential. We're getting for sale and rental and affordable and mixed income. Like, those are all the elements I want to see. And it's just disappointing to see that that had to shift over time. And I understand why it happened, but I just wanted to make that comment that I think, that's something that we need to think about as we're talking about these cases. It's not, we want to see better. We don't, I'm not, at least me personally, I'm not looking for less. I'm looking for better development and better design. And I know you are always bringing cases that I feel like stretch beyond what you brought before, and I appreciate that. And I hope that we don't kind of run into this issue too much in the future.
And if I could speak, you still have the potential for the mix of rental, affordable, and for sale affordable and things, because there's a lot of builders out there doing 100, 200, 300 unit single-family developments that are rental only. Most of the national market, national builders have divisions that just do rental only. So I added that condition about the rental to ensure that whether it was a rental, some rental townhomes, or for sale, we would have it covered in both. But I think there's a decent chance you're going to get that mix you're looking for, even if there's not apartments on the site. Yeah.
That's fair. I appreciate that. That said, still, like, we could have had 3 different types of housing on site instead of just 2, and that's disappointing to me. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Cease.
Thank you. Jared, I appreciate the honesty in losing sleep over loss of density. I hope you continue to lose sleep over loss of density, because then I know, seeing how you work with the commission and on projects to move your applications in ways that perhaps are a little bit more closely aligned with some of the things that come out of the conversations in this forum than some other applications that come before us. I think that you could be a partner with us in getting to that point. And the point, to specify it, is as the chair said, yeah, I think there's a real opportunity here to do something more. And this is not in any way to diminish the concerns that we've heard expressed by members of the public, which are very understandable, because there is, at present, I think, a real incompatibility between the proposal and just the PDR zoning, which speaks about compatibility with the adjacent uses. It speaks about opening up innovative development. We could argue about what aspects of the proposal are innovative or not, but I think in the context of where Durham is, that there's a lot more room and should be a higher bar of expectation of what could be conceived of as innovative, whether it's in the form of financing, whether it's in the form of affordable housing, whether it's in the form of energy. But in this case, I think what is specific and why I wanted just to make a couple of quick comments is that many of the projects that we've heard or have come before us in the time that I've been on the commission, which is not a long time, but it's a year plus or so, I think, in this part of the city and county, come with challenges in terms of access, in addition to all the other challenges that we heard about with stormwater, utilities, et cetera. And Mr. Edens is right. The city has made an investment in utilities in this region, and that's a factor. The improved transportation investments, if you will, in Raleigh are also a factor. I mean, in terms of regional locations, this is an incredibly efficient place to access a lot of different things, both in Durham and in Wake County. The difficulty is that the surface infrastructure is still largely the rural surface infrastructure that's been there for decades and hasn't caught up. And what's different, to kind of get to the point here, what's different about this site from some of those we've heard, I think, is that it has really good connection and frontage on 3 different roadways. A lot have, more limited connection, whether it was Olive Branch Road or some of these other projects that have come before us with limited connectivity. This has really good frontages, and it's fairly close to the proposed Leesville Road right-of-way extension. It's close to Briar Creek. It's close, but not quite there. The reason I think it's important to point out that this could be more is because of where it is within the existing street network, but also because of the size. 78 acres is really that's a large parcel for development. It's not as large as a lot of what we see before us. And so I do think that 78 acres could accommodate a lot more, perhaps even with some public support for some of those infrastructure improvements. So they're not all being carried on whatever residential component is being proposed. 78 acres, we've in some of the prior conversations, I've talked in terms of blocks. With this one, I'll talk in terms of like villages or towns. I mean, you could practically fit all of, I was quickly looking at 2 North Carolina towns. You could practically fit all of downtown Elkin, a cool little mountain town, or Piedmont mountain town, on that 78 acres. You could fit half of downtown Edenton, kind of a classic, first colonial capital of North Carolina, on 78 acres. That's a lot of space to do something, to do more than just 2 housing types, to do more than just 5 units to the acre. Because what 2 housing types and 5 units to the acre is, or 5.6, whatever the number is, that's just more of the same kind of suburban development that has produced the insufficient transportation infrastructure in this part of the county. So I would encourage kind of just a pause, not a pause from the standpoint of letting things catch up, but a pause from the standpoint of making this something more. And I think that that could be advantageous to the applicant, and it could certainly be advantageous to the community and the city as a whole. So I don't support it as is, but I think you have an opportunity to do something much more. Thank you.
Yeah, and a couple of comments. I know I mentioned you know, the apartments and whatnot, yeah, I think that would be a good use. But the fact of the matter is, in the current environment, we have to also follow the market and the construction costs and finance costs. And, you know, right now, if you look around Durham, any part of Durham, and I've got some good apartment projects we're working on, they don't really finance right now. The new construction, existing apartments are getting bought and sold, you know, like hotcakes, but new construction, I was talking with a national builder a couple weeks ago. It's really hard on the new construction. So it's a factor of a lot of things. It was a road realignment. It was neighborhood feedback. It's not always want to be the first apartment project in an area. You know, this is not on 98 or Highway 70 and some of that typical kind of frontage. We thought Olive Branch might create some of that frontage and that thoroughfare traffic to support it, but that didn't play out. But just make it clear, it's a combination of things. And to try to offset that, you know, we've specified 3 different townhome types. You know, we have some front entry, some rear entry. I don't think the city park is, you know, that's significant. That's a big cost and a big public benefit. The collector roads, the way that's designed, you know, there's a mention of trails. Well, we're building 10-foot trails on both sides of our collector roads throughout the community. So it might not be an official greenway, but it's got tons of pedestrian space. We're talking, it'll be miles when you do both sides of thousands of feet of road of greenway that's being built in the most accessible part of the neighborhood. So I agree, every site could always be a little bit more, but I think we've hit the high points. But just want to make it clear, the apartments was a function of a lot of things, not just that one thing.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis.
I just have a quick question for Pam Andrews. So you said you spoke to the fire chiefs. I kind of want to, you know, just briefly hear what they said.
Sure. Donna and I and her husband met with them this week. They called us impromptu because we've been sending out some emails to them, and they asked us to come to the site, the blasting site, which was right beside the little log cabin that I showed you. And the concern was that the homes that were right beside that blasting site did not get pre-inspections. And they came out there and they went door to door at that particular site and asked them, you know, did you get a letter? 2 of the 3 homes that are right beside that got letters. As I said, the 80-year-old elderly Chile immigrant did not understood what it meant. So they're going to go back and do a pre-inspection, but it's a little too late because obviously there's already been a lot of blasting there. I mean, I appreciate the fact that the fire chiefs are making sure that the pre-inspection's done, but you look at all the blasting that's been done. The lot is cleared. There is a retention pond right beside her home. Chief Morton, also Assistant Chief Morton, talked with us, and the issue has been the blasting permit says, I can give you the permit, you have to test the wells if there is well water within 500 feet within 24 to 48 hours. Not one of those wells out there have been tested within that time zone. Matter of fact, he told us that day that the blasting company did not want to test the 3 homes that got tested because his project was done. He didn't want to test them. And Chief Morton said, you will test them. And only then was it done, but it was done 3 weeks after the final blast. That's not what the permit says. Our residents are not being treated fairly, folks. I'm coming as humbly as I can before you tonight. I really am. The permit says 24 to 48 hours. And so they are aware of this. There was none, and that particular site has been blasted since 2020. An elderly resident's well caved in and cost her 10 grand. She's 90 years old. Check out our YouTube site. There's an interview on site with her. Nothing was paid to help her restore that well.
Thank you.
I don't know if that helps or not, and that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Seeing no other questions or comments, I'd be ready for a motion at this time.
Sure. Mr. Chair. Have to get a microphone on. Mr. Chair, I'd like to take case number Z2200016 the Shady Grove Assemblage with the noted proffers, and we've already listed those, with the listed proffers to be forwarded to the City Council with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Morgan, seconded by Commissioner Valentine Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, may we have the roll call vote?
Chairman Dolia,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cameron,
Yes.
Commissioner Cutright,
Yes.
Commissioner Shigaris,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrod,
Yes.
Commissioner McGyver,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
No?
Commissioner Cease,
No.
Commissioner Trapp,
Yes.
Commissioner Valentine,
No.
Commissioner Zuri Williams.
Yes.
The motion carries 9-3.
Great, thank you. Thanks to applicants, thanks to staff. We're going to move forward in our agenda. I'd like to move a little bit quicker on these next items if possible. I don't want to limit commissioner comment time, but I will resort to that if necessary. Next case is case Z2200026 Kempski Milstead. We'll begin with the staff report.
Mayor Powell, Planning Department. This case is Z2200026 Kempski Milstead, home for a proposed zoning map change. The proposal is located at 220 and 214 Riley Road. The site is one parcel which totals 22.584 acres. It is within the suburban development tier and is within the county limits. No annexation petition has been requested at this time. The proposal is a straight rezoning with no text or graphic development plan to facilitate the construction of a single-family home. The site is currently zoned residential rural with a development plan, and the applicant is requesting a rezone to residential rural. This would remove the use restriction of the current development plan, which limits the allowed uses on site to recreational uses. However, given that there are no commitments, this proposal would also allow the full list of uses and development intensity of the residential rural zoning district. The existing future land use map designation is low-density residential, and staff would not recommend a change to this designation. Lastly, the site is within the Falls Jordan District B watershed protection overlay. The zoning context map shows the surrounding zoning designations. The properties immediately adjacent to the site are zoned residential suburban 20. As previously mentioned, the site would retain the residential rural zoning designation, but remove the development plan that is currently applicable to the site. And the aerial map shows the general location of the project. A neighborhood meeting was held in accordance with UDO requirements on March 18th, 2022, and no social pinpoint comments were provided. Staff determines that this request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted ordinances and policies. The proposal would allow the proposed single-family house, but would also allow all uses permitted in the residential rural district. The residential rural designation is less intense than the surrounding residential suburban 20 zoning of the surrounding properties. The proposal is consistent with the current low-density residential future land use map designation, and staff and the applicant are available to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. With that, we'll open the public hearing, and we'll start with 10 minutes provided to the applicant to provide any opening remarks.
Okay. I'm Caitlin Kempski. I live at 1620 Magnolia Oak Place in Durham, North Carolina, 27703. My husband and I own this property, and we are just looking to remove the development plan so that we can build a home on it instead of the disc golf course that it is currently zoned for. And that is it. Okay.
Thank you. With that, we will move to public comment. Is there anybody who would like to speak on this case? Nobody signed up. If there's anybody in the public hearing or in the Zoom meeting, please raise your hand at this time. Okay, seeing none, we'll move to commissioner comments and questions. Are there any commissioner comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I would take a motion at this time.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we take case number Z2200026, the Kempski Milstead home, to be forwarded to the county commission with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Morgan, seconded by Vice Chair Cameron. May we have the roll call vote?
Chair Amendolia,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cameron,
Yes.
Commissioner Cutright,
Yes.
Commissioner Shigaris,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrod,
Yes.
Commissioner McGyver,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Cease,
Yes.
Commissioner Trapp,
Yes.
Commissioner Valentine,
Yes.
Commissioner Zuri Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries 12-0.
Great, thank you. Thanks to the applicant for giving us something really easy. Okay, next item on our agenda is case Z2200046 Blanchard Property. We'll begin with the staff report.
Okay. Demir Powell, Planning Department. This case is Z2200046 Blanchard Property for proposed zoning map change. The proposal is located at 2935 US 70 East. The site is one parcel which totals 3.073 acres. It is within the suburban development tier and within the county. The existing zoning is split zoned residential rural and commercial general. The applicant is proposing to rezone the entire property to commercial general to facilitate future commercial development. This is a straight rezoning with no text or graphic development plan associated with the proposal. The existing future land use map designation is commercial, and staff would not recommend a change to this designation. Lastly, this property is located in the Falls Jordan District B watershed protection overlay. The zoning context map shows the current zoning of the property, which is split zoned, and you can see the residential rural to the north and commercial general to the south. The proposal will rezone the entire property to commercial general. The adjacent properties surrounding the site are also zoned commercial general. And the aerial map shows the general location of the project. A neighborhood meeting was held in accordance with UDO requirements on August 19th, 2022, and no social pinpoint comments were provided. Staff determines that this request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted ordinances and policies. The proposal would allow all uses permitted in the commercial general zoning district. Surrounding zoning designations of the adjacent properties are also commercial general, and the proposal is consistent with the commercial future land use map designation. And staff and the applicant are available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Okay, we will open the public hearing and we'll provide 10 minutes for the applicant to provide any opening remarks.
Thank you, Chair Amendolia, members of the commission. Randy Herman, attorney from the law office of B.A. Folk, here representing the applicant. The main thing that you need to know about this application is that slide that staff showed showing the zoning context. So the portion of this property that runs along 70 and all of the surrounding properties are zoned commercial general. It's also shown as commercial on the future land use map. For reasons that I have not been able to figure out, the part of the property that sticks up away from 70 is zoned for residential. It's an old kind of legacy zoning that's been there for many years. And all we're trying to do is kind of standardize the zoning across the property so that the entire thing is commercial general, the same as all the surrounding parcels, so that hopefully at some point in the future there can be commercial development at that intersection. The property is right at that intersection at Leesville and 70. And the fact that the sticking out part of the property is a residential district is one of the reasons that that intersection has not yet been developed. There's no social pinpoint comments specifically about this project, but if you look generally at the comments generally at that intersection, all of the comments also say that what the residents want to see is commercial development eventually at that intersection. So that's all we're trying to do is facilitate that. We're not currently proposing annexation into the city. It's going to remain county zoning. It would eventually be annexed when it's developed, but because we at this point don't have specific development plans, it's not appropriate for annexation yet. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this case tonight? Okay, Seeing none, I'll turn it over to any questions from commissioners. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I would accept a motion at this time.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion that we take case Z2200046, which is the Blanchard property, to be forwarded to the county commission with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Morgan, seconded by Commissioner Valentine. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, may we have the roll call vote?
Chair Amendolia,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cameron,
Yes.
Commissioner Cutright,
Yes.
Commissioner Chagaris,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrod,
Yes.
Commissioner McIver,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Cease,
Yes.
Commissioner Trapp,
Yes.
Commissioner Valentine,
Yes.
Commissioner Zuri-Williams.
Yes.
The motion carries 12-0.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to our next set of public hearings, which are for text amendments to the UDO. We have one. This is case TC 22-005, Erosion Control UDO text amendment. We'll begin with the staff report.
Okay. All right, good evening. I'm Ryan Eves. I'm the Division Manager for Stormwater and Erosion Control Division in County Engineering. My division oversees all land disturbance permits and all erosion control activities for the county, both inside and outside city limits. Okay, I guess they do have my presentation up. I'm going to go fairly quickly through this. Hopefully you've had a chance to review. Do you have control? Is control over there? Oh, all right. Let's get, all right. As you've heard, there are a number of concerns about some of these larger sites, particularly in southeastern Durham, and the types of soils that we're dealing with. And so we are proposing some amendments to deal with those. Next slide. So just a word about process. The county has been designated a local program for erosion and sediment control by the State Sedimentation Control Commission. And because of that, any amendments we make to our erosion control ordinances must go through the Sedimentation Control Commission first. They are reviewed by the DEQ and their Division of Energy, Mineral, and Land Resources. We have already taken these amendments for an informal review to the SED Commission at their November meeting and received a favorable review of our amendments. Then they are locally adopted. So these are in the UDO, so they'll have to be adopted by both the City Council and the Board of Commissioners. Then we go back to the SED Commission for their final approval, and then they become effective. It appears that this where we are in the process, it'll likely be their May meeting because they only meet quarterly, when we'll be able to take these back for final approval, assuming they are adopted locally. So I'm going to go through fairly quickly what these amendments are. The first is we're requiring 2 rows of silt fence spaced 3 feet apart along all buffer zones, including all streams, wetlands, and sensitive areas of sites. I will say this is something that we already recommend, and we don't get much pushback from designers on this and developers. They're willing to go ahead and do this, so we just wanted to codify it to make sure we can get it on all sites. And then you've heard a lot about the Triassic soils. Triassic soils are very fine clay soils. They do not settle very quickly out of the water column. And so we have some very specific requirements that we are going to add to the ordinance in order to hopefully address some of the concerns with what I'm sure unlovingly has been called tomato soup in the water, particularly in Lick Creek, but across the county. So these are some things that you actually already heard proffered by a number of developers, and we felt like those proffers are a good remedy to this, and so we're going to go ahead and codify them for the Triassic areas of the county. That's larger sediment basins, longer dewatering time, meaning that water is going to stay in that basin a little longer, give it time to more time for it to settle. Stricter ground cover requirements, particularly on slopes, and then requirement of flocculants. Next. So really quickly, if you're not familiar with flocculants, they are a chemical additive to, it's added to the ground. It's picked up by typically in diversion ditches or things like that, where it's collected by runoff headed to those sediment basins, where it's then allowed, then causes the smaller sediment particles, those small clay particles, to coagulate, to get together, which makes them heavier, which makes them settle faster. And so that is the reason we are recommending their use. What we're including in the ordinance is are some details as to how they're to be used, which ones can be used, and what we want to see on a plan when developments are submitting their erosion control plans as to how they're going to be used. I would like to point out we have one of the world's foremost experts in flocculants, Dr. Rich McLaughlin at NC State University. He has reviewed our ordinance amendments, and he sits on the Sedimentation Control Commission, and so he's reviewed and approved these. And we would be the first community in the state to actually have flocculants required in our ordinance. Again, this is more about what we will require in the plan and what's required in the ordinance as far as what is allowed and what we want to see on plans for flocculants that are being used. Finally, we're including another enforcement tool. We currently have the ability to issue notices of violation, civil penalties, and those are our main two enforcement tools. But we're adding stop work orders, meaning we can require activities to cease on a site, except for those for erosion control, meaning, basically vertical building has to stop if a site is out of order with its erosion control. We know this to be a very successful method used by other communities for getting sites into compliance. And with that, I'll, I guess, take questions, or you can open the public hearing and we can go from there.
Great, thank you. With that, we'll open the public hearing. We have several people who signed up to speak in person, and I already see hands getting raised on the Zoom meeting. So we'll start with the in-person speakers. We have Pam Andrews, Tom Freeman, Pam Williams, and Donna Steinbeck. You all have 2 minutes each. Please state your name and address and then make your comments.
All right, I have a video. Hold on. Don't start my time. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, this is Lick Creek today, crossing over going into Falls Lake, right there. That's what it looks like. We sincerely thank Ryan. Rarely do I am up here for an amendment, but this is I am for. Jonathan McNeil, Ryan, Sarah, staff, we sincerely thank you. We're thrilled that this is happening, but there are a few things I want to say. Flocculants, I'm excited about this, Ryan. There have been some negative health impacts and the environmental hazards associated with chemical flocculants, so I'm glad to see that Dr. McLaughlin is working with you all so we use the right one, so thank you. You even said on your slide, the over-application of a flocculant can create a stormwater pollution itself, so thank you. Mass grading, we've got to limit the mass grading. I'm sorry, our opponents left, but anyway, this sensitive Triassic Basin soil, we need to limit it to 20 acres, and that is in another amendment coming up. I also want to mention the riparian buffers. We need strongly to have a 150-foot riparian corridor to protect these sensitive soils, as we've seen. The stormwater ponds, 100-year minimum. I mean, we just have to. We have sites in Southeast Durham where the red water is flowing off of even ones that are already built. And some of those ponds have been redone 2 and 3 times over there. Ground cover, fabulous. We need it down as fast as we can. There are sites out there across from that little log cabin that there is still not sufficient ground cover, and it's been going on for 2 years almost out there, at least a year and a half. Cumulative impacts is fabulous. We would like to see the impacts to the larger watershed taken into account when grading these soil and erosion permits. Impacts on human health is mentioned in the packet. Wildlife, aquatic ecosystems. I'm a retired science teacher. I taught Zuri. I have to protect the environment. I have to. That's just what I do. Stop work orders is huge. I cannot believe a county this big doesn't have one already, but we don't. Only time's going to really tell how effective these will be. But I thank you sincerely, sincerely for your efforts. And Alex for helping me get this video posted. Thank you, Alex. All right, I'm out of the way. Good night.
Thank you. Tom Freeman, Pam Williams.
Hello again. Thomas Freeman, lifelong Durham County resident, 1818 Southview Road, Durham, NC. I'll be very brief. I'd like to very clearly make a point and clearly state less development is better development. That is an ideological difference between the county residents and those who would seek to make massive changes of it. I'd like to comment on the stop work order. It's imperative that the language should identify specifically who may issue a stop work order for the violation that has occurred. As Pam has alluded to, there's a great deal of confusion within agencies as to who has responsibility for what. So it's absolutely imperative that this clause of the stop work order identify who by title is responsible for that stop work order. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name's Pam Williams. I live at 2130 Adventure Trail, Durham, North Carolina. I am very much for this text amendment, this ordinance change. I'm a little disappointed that it's not getting to the February meeting with DEQ. I was hoping that it would, so it would go into effect, so all these, the developers from here on out would follow this. I'm looking forward to the tree preservation and the blasting change. It's number 4 that's coming up. I know it's a little bit more difficult for the developers to accept all that. The stop work order, I'm very happy to see that. I worked for DOT for close to 40 years. It's very effective with the contractors, and when they are out there clearing 200 acres or more at a time, we need something that we can stop them and make them pay attention to the erosion control. Again, I want to thank Ryan, Alex, all those in the planning department that has pushed this through. I know it's a lot of hard work, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. Donna Steinbeck.
I'm Donna Steinbeck at 4825 Jimmy Rogers Road. I am also a proponent of this amendment, and I'm very grateful that it's being done. I'm hoping that we can make the February deadline and maybe help our other departments along the way make decisions so that we do not have to wait till May and have to ask for proffers from the developers, you know, between February and May. So thank you.
Thank you. We have a few people in the Zoom meeting who have raised their hand to speak. First up, Mimi Kessler. Mimi, you'll have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name's Mimi Kessler. I live at 1418 Woodland Drive. I am very excited about this. I feel like this particular thing is something that the residents of Durham are getting a pat on the back, and I'm very excited about this. I have a friend who lives on Olive Branch Road, and there's a development going on off her backyard. And a bulldozer came and was cutting down trees and there's a little creek there. Now, I don't honestly know what that creek is. And they just ran right into the creek, and there was no buffer around the creek at all. And so I imagine that was part of what's caused all of this sediment issue. And it's my understanding that nothing happens currently to that developer. So the stop work order is a good step, but I hope that there are also some very severe monetary penalties, because the monetary factor is the only thing that I think the developers really care about. The other point I wanted to make is that if there's a delay, in terms of it being applied in May, I do think that we need to get proffers between tonight and whenever it gets through the bureaucracy. I think we do need to ask for proffers, that every development abide by these standards, and then we don't have to do anything more. I'd really rather go retroactively before now, but of course we can't do that. So thank you very much. I really am excited about this text amendment, and you all know I don't like text amendments. So thank you.
Thank you, Mimi. Next, we have Laura Stroud. Laura, you'll have 2 minutes. Please state your name and address and make your comments.
Thank you. My name is Laura Stroud with, I'm the Water Management Program Coordinator at Ellerbe Creek Watershed Association. We're located at 904 Broad Street. And I'm speaking tonight on behalf of EQUA staff and some of our volunteer committee members who are water quality experts and have been involved in various levels of government in the past. We're speaking in support of the proposed text changes, and are really happy to see some of what's included in this ordinance. Through my work with EQUA, I've seen some brazen and some opportunistic violations of sediment and erosion control permits, including a site emptying a sump pump directly into a stormwater grate. So the inclusion of stop work orders are an essential part of this text change to ensure that staff can enforce these requirements. Some developers in our community are going to do the right thing, but there are others who view sediment and erosion control violation fees as the cost of doing business, and we can't let that happen at the cost to our natural streams and our stormwater infrastructure. We're happy to see the requirement of the use of flocculants. As others have mentioned, flocculants, when used correctly, are not harmful to the aquatic environment, but can be when used improperly. And so we also want to make sure that county staff are equipped to be observing that and enforcing that as well. And finally, we're happy to see the requirement to cover steep slopes with exposed soils, but want to point out that Triassic basin soils are highly erodible at slopes as low as 15%, which is much less than what's currently covered under the UDO's definition of steep slopes at 25% grade or more. And yeah.
Laura, your 2 minutes are over.
Great, thank you so much. That was the end of my comments. Thank you to city staff, and y'all have a great night.
Thank you. Next, we have Rebecca Freeman. Rebecca, you'll have 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you. I'm Rebecca Freeman at 1818 Southview Road, and I will fully support the cementation and erosion control text amendment that particularly speaks to Triassic soils and the issues that are occurring with the Triassic soils at present. And I want to thank the Preserve Rural Durham for fighting for this for a long time, and especially I want to thank Brian Eves and others who worked on these to bring these into, tighten them up a lot so that they would hopefully help the environment a lot. However, there are 2 additional places that I think should be clarified, and that is on page 1 of the section 15.5, number C, and then at the top of page 2 in number C as well. Like the former speaker spoke about the stop work order, the county may issue a stop work order, and it should be clarified as to who that would be, what the job classification, whatever it be, Same thing with notice of violation. Midway, a notice of violation should be served upon that person, but who does that? And then also enforcement action should be initiated. Who is responsible to do this? And so that would take out the questions and the misunderstanding about whose responsibility it is to make sure that notice of violations are actually issued in a timely manner when they need to be. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Last, we have Samantha Kropp. Samantha, you'll have 2 minutes to provide your comments.
Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Samantha Kropp. I am speaking as a representative of the nonprofit Sound Rivers in my role as News Riverkeeper. And my comments are in support of this text amendment, though I ask that the Planning Commission go even farther to strengthen regulations for the sake of protecting water quality. As you know, significant sediment pollution is already occurring from developments in Durham County. Since June, I have documented alarming levels of sediment in the rapidly developing Lick Creek watershed. I've recorded water quality violations with turbidity levels orders of magnitude over state standards, and I have personally observed sediment-filled water running directly off of active development sites and flowing into waters of the state. Essentially, ongoing developments are violating the Clean Water Act because our current regulations are not strong enough to stop them in the Triassic Basin. Sound Rivers has offered detailed comments on the proposed text amendment and has shared these with Durham's Sediment and Erosion team and the City Planner's Office. Our comments outline several ways in which we think the amendments can and should go further to protect our waterways. We would like to see hastened timelines for replacing ground cover, including on flat ground, and native ground cover required. We'd also like to see stormwater basins required to accommodate water for the 100-year storm, and a settling efficiency aimed at reducing runoff from the smaller clay-sized particles that make up Triassic Basin soils. Our recommendations also include support for a cumulative impacts analysis and other creative measures that can go far to protect water quality. Currently, Sound Rivers is the only organization meaningfully tracking water quality impacts from ongoing developments in the Lick Creek watershed. We'd like to see regulations require that water quality sampling be conducted before and after land disturbances take place to ensure future land use changes are meeting clean water requirements. And most importantly, we ask that the planning board do what it can to ensure that future developments are subject to these new and important regulations. Towards that end, please put a pause on approval of new land disturbance proposals in the Lick Creek watershed, which is already so heavily impacted, until this amendment and the new mass grading amendment are in full effect. I so much appreciate the work that you all are doing towards this and appreciate all the effort going into making sure these amendments are going to be effective. Thank you for attention to this issue, and I would really value the opportunity to discuss our water quality sampling efforts
Samantha?
and our input on these amendments with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I was like, okay, any commissioner questions or comments? Commissioner Morgan.
I had really one question for staff. I was looking through the text amendment. I was just wondering, from an enforcement perspective, who's the responsible party that does the checking and enforcement? I was trying to see where that is in the text amendment.
So it's not included in the, specifically in the stop work order section. I mean, it says the county. If you look elsewhere in that section, and this section 15.5 is in the enforcement section of the UDO. It's under sedimentation and erosion control enforcement, which basically means my division. You'll see elsewhere in the ordinance, it says the erosion control officer. I hold that title as well, or designee, and so it's essentially me and my staff that do the enforcement, because we're the ones that do the inspections and issue permits for land disturbing activity.
How often do we do inspections? As I know you may not have all the staff, but I just wondered how often.
Right. Our goal is to do visit sites monthly. We have currently have 4.5 staff assigned to erosion control. That includes plans review and other administrative tasks. But we have about 280 active sites currently. And so our goal is monthly. We're hitting sites about every 6 weeks currently.
Thank you. I know we got a lot of ground to cover.
Thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Harrod.
Just a quick question. Would it help if the public requested some additional staff for you?
We added an erosion control technician in this last year, and that has certainly helped. He didn't get on the ground until October, so we're definitely trending in the right direction as far as how we're hitting our sites. So that's helped. Not opposed to asking for more staff. We don't quite have the vehicles or the room to house them currently in our offices, but that's not something we're looking for right now. But again, not something we're necessarily opposed to.
Commissioner Shigaris.
Yes, for Ryan Eves. My question goes to so in this text amendment, there's a comment that says if it rains a lot and there's more runoff, then they add more flocculants. And I know that the Raleigh NC Department of Natural Resources has rules and regulations on that. So say that there's a situation where there's a lot of rain and then they just add more flocculants and then they bioaccumulate and then that's when they can become toxic. What measures are going to be in place for removal if they have to add too many during the process? Who's going to be responsible for that? Are we going to pull a sample? Are we going to be able to hold the developer responsible if they have to use too many of them? Something like that. And I also went through the list of flocculants approved, and I see that there are some that are plant-based, which are more environmentally friendly. Perhaps this would be an opportunity for Durham to, do something really green here.
Yeah, so that's part of the reason we are requiring this application plan, so that we can review, and I believe one thing that was mentioned was, I can't remember who it was, but that we'll continue to learn more about, flocculants and their use. Part of the question about the application is you obviously want to make sure that that when we do have rain events, that they're following up to make sure that there are still some flocculant available for the next rain event, right? And that they're not just adding it over and over again. One thing that happens is that one way that I think we will prevent kind of mass accumulation is that sediment basins are required to be cleaned out when they reach half of their capacity. And so and those flocculants are part of that sediment. That's what's making it fall out and is in the bed of the basin. So when those basins are reaching half of their capacity, they're then mucked out, and that soil is removed, and either it can be placed elsewhere on site. It would then be covered by ground cover, so that it would hopefully not continue to cause more sediment and concern. There's still a lot to be learned about how the flocculants will be applied. Again, we're working on making sure that our staff are as knowledgeable as possible. We're also going to be working to educate developers, because this will be new for a lot of them as well. So that's another kind of piece that's not necessarily in the text amendments, but is a part of our action plan towards as we move towards implementing these text amendments.
Yes, my comments will include making sure that if that basin does have to be cleaned out, number one, that it will have to be tested to make sure it's not over a certain toxic level. And then if that soil is just placed somewhere else on the site, then you're just going to be creating, one environmental problem for another. Makes sure there's some sort of remediation, the remediation costs, and placing that on the developers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Yeah, Commissioner McIver.
I had a question about the sediment control and the dewatering time that you're proposing. Just what % increase were you proposing? Just because I know plenty of times we design these sediment basins to be converted to storm control measures later on in the process.
Right. So currently, your minimum time is 3 days. That's required by ordinance, required as part of the state erosion control manual. We're increasing it to 4 days in the Triassic soils, the area with Triassic soils. As far as conversion to permanent stormwater basins, We do not allow conversion to the permanent stormwater control measure until the site is fully stabilized. And so at that point, flocculants wouldn't be needed. We would be not be as concerned with the retention of sediment-laden water. By then, we hopefully would have much cleaner water to worry about.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I would accept a motion at this time.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we take text amendment TC 22-005 for the erosion control UDO text amendment to be forwarded to the city and county with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Morgan, seconded by Commissioner Cameron. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, may we have the roll call vote?
Chair Amendolia,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cameron,
Yes.
Commissioner Cutright,
Yes.
Commissioner Shigeris,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Herod,
Yes.
Commissioner McIver,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan, Commissioner Cease,
Yes.
Commissioner Trapp,
Yes.
Commissioner Valentine,
Yes.
Commissioner Zuri Williams.
Yes.
The motion carries 12-0.
Great, thank you. So before we leave, I just want to make one quick note that next month, our meeting is not the second Tuesday of the month. It was originally February 14th, but we have rescheduled it to be February 28th. I can't remember why, but we did. And staff, is there any other announcements or anything else you need from us before we depart?
One last thing. Oh, we rescheduled the meeting because that was in line with getting the comp plan to you all. That's why we did it. There was a little time crunch there. One last thing. I had sent out a doodle poll at the request of the city clerk's office to have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and the City Council. I've gotten some responses. If you're not able to make it, understood. If you could just reply to that. I think I've gotten like 7 responses, so about half the commission. So, and I understand that some people will not be there. They couldn't fill out the doodle poll, so they actually emailed me back. So there was something going on with the doodle poll too. So thank you. That was it.
Great. With that, this meeting is adjourned at 8:42 p.m. Eastern Time.